Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations Podcast. Guess what? My guest for today's episode is none other than the returning great and powerful Jackie Smit of the Into the Necrosphere podcast. As I'm sure many of you are probably aware by now, Jackie and I have probably done, I think this is number 7 podcast that we have done together, but most of these has been me appearing on his show. So I decided to call him back to join me on mine. So we got to finally have a conversation and get to hear a little bit more of his perspective on things, and this turned out to be a conversation that is pretty much almost entirely detached from music and instead all about various different aspects of life and the current state of the world and politics and everything, like all the stuff that you're not supposed to talk about. We went there. So yeah, and on top of that, there's so many personal and candid stories shared on this episode from both of us that neither of us have ever shared publicly before. So this turned out to be a very special one. That's all I can really say about that. So I hope that you guys will enjoy this, and yeah, all I will ask you to do is to just proceed with an open mind, okay? Because these are not conversations that are necessarily not only PC in any way, but there's a lot of taboo subjects that him and I got to discuss. And since Jackie and I have become very good friends in the course of the time that since we have started talking and since we've met each other and since we've been doing all of these podcast episodes, if I was to discuss any of those topics with anyone on the show, it would have been Jackie. So I think that it turned out to be a very powerful and a very special episode indeed. So that's really about as much as I need to say regarding the introduction for this episode. So if you're new to the channel, or if you haven't done so already, please feel free to hit the subscribe button, and if you do enjoy the content, feel free to share it around, and of course feel free to also revisit some of the previous episodes in the back catalog of Iblis Manifestations as well. And if you have a spare moment, you can also go and check out the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse, where there are various other shows and podcasts which I would highly recommend. Jackie's Into the Necrosphere being one of those, and the links to all of those podcasts are included in the description, so go and check those guys out. Okay? Just before we proceed into the conversation between Jackie and I would like to invite you all to take a moment to check out my band Trivax's new album titled Iloa Burns Out, which recently just came out via Cold Never Dies, and it's out there everywhere. You can listen to it on Spotify, stream it, you can listen to it on YouTube, or you can actually go and purchase the CDs, vinyls, and also the tapes, which will be coming soon from our Bandcamp page. Or alternatively, you can go and support the label and get it from them. So yeah, if you have a spare moment, if you haven't done so already, I know many of you already have who watch this podcast, but if you haven't done so already, I would very much appreciate it if you took the time to go and check out the album as well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome back Jackie Smit to Iblis Manifestations.
Is you don't have to really like even give a shit about an intro, like, hey, how's it going, welcome to the podcast kind of thing. I do exactly what you just did. I just hit record and I just fade into the, you join us as we're mid conversation type of thing.
Yeah, fuck it. Well, because this is sort of for us, it's like a easy continuation of the hours of podcasting prior to this. Yeah. Actually, you know what? Obviously, I am joking when I say that. Jackie, it's so nice to meet you, man. Finally, welcome to the podcast. It's great to. We met about a couple of months ago, and when I was talking to you, I was like, "Wow, this guy would make a great podcast host. He should have his own show." So here we are.
He should think of starting something by himself.
That's
Yeah.
it. No, it's a pleasure to have you back on here, man. I know this is what episode 7 we're doing together, but it's the
It
second
might
one
even
on
be more.
Iblis.
And I think in terms of pure hours, if it's episode 7, considering the fact that we average about 2 hours a piece, it's we're talking well over 14, 15 hours. So
That's it, yeah, probably, and there's never a dull moment really. So this one's bound to be the disastrous one, obviously, because there's high expectations. So fingers crossed.
I doubt it, mate. It's just like if we were talking. I mean, I think to anyone listening or watching, this would basically be like exactly the same way as if we were talking to each other. We've just hit record.
That's it, yeah, pretty much, man. I was, I was listening to the podcast you did with Kyle Nasal Kameth from Aklis, who's obviously been on this show, and I do look forward to having him back on here at some point. But man, that was good. That was a very fucking interesting conversation that you guys had, and it really made me think. Like I completely got sort of. That's the thing I like about these podcasts is you listen to the episodes, and especially when it's between two friends who you already respect and have spoken to and have high regards for, and there's that like-mindedness there, and that sort of like triggers different types of thought processes within your head, and I was just sat there, and I was actually doing some work, and then I was sat there and I was like, fuck, like that's that level of depth that was getting triggered in my brain, like had zero compatibility with what was in front of me at that moment, but it was great. I like those kind of things, that it sort of takes you out of it, and then you start thinking about life, and especially when you guys were talking about Kali Yuga, I was like, shit, that's fucking real, and it just, it's a very deep one.
Well, so the interesting thing is, I agree with you. It was a great episode. I always know. I think I've said this to you offline. I always know it's been a great episode when I'm busy editing or when I listen back to the final thing. I find myself kind of getting lost in the episode myself, and it'll be like 45 minutes in. I'm listening to my own podcast for 45 minutes. Whether I'm in the gym or I'm busy driving or whatever. And this was exactly like that. Like I was listening back to it. And it was kind of the same as like the last time that you were on Into the Necrosphere. The episode just kept going and going and going, and I realized I've been listening to this for an hour already. I've had overwhelmingly positive feedback about the episode, but I had one person who was like, and I don't know if it's somebody who listens to the podcast, but really seems to have taken offense to the fact that we discussed the Kali Yuga, number one, that the phrase neo-Marxists was used, and that we spoke about. He described it in his comment, or she, as ranting about Julius Evola, and it was like, I didn't even bother responding because I thought to myself, well, first of all, it wasn't a rant. There was actually really the only reference to Julius Evola was the fact that people had taken such umbrage to the fact that Nightbringer had used Julius Evola sample on one of their songs. And what I said was there's a selective outrage in people getting upset about that, and yet they don't seem to give a shit about people like Charles Manson being sampled in multiple songs. And Charles Manson was an avowed white supremacist. He was he had a swastika carved on his forehead, for fuck's sake. He was certainly a misogynist. He was there was a lot of things that people can take issue with him. He's an interesting character.
And the product of the CIA.
Well, yeah, there's that as well. So that was the only thing that we said there. The Kali Yuga was genuinely my curiosity. I mean, I've read a lot and I've looked a lot into things like the fourth turning. I don't look I come from quite a different background as far as I think you and Nas have certainly way more in-depth knowledge about esoteric matters than I do. And what I was curious was how the thinking behind things like the Kali Yuga ties into like the idea, the concept of the fourth turning. So that's why that came up. And then neo-Marxists. I mean, I didn't realize that we're now at a point where we're no longer even allowed to say that we disagree with Marxism, or where we refer to people that openly embrace Marxist theories and teachings as Marxists, because that now apparently is a wolf whistle to the far right. It's fucking insane.
It is insane, and like I don't know what the fuck some of the people are doing here, and by the people here, I mean people in the West, because I was, I mean, not everyone is completely a sheep when it comes to these things. People still do have their senses about them. Like as segregated as we may feel, there is still some degree of hope in the sense that a lot of people still do have their wits about them. But the problem is that those people think they're in the minority when they are actually the majority. Okay, so there's this little bit of a power play, and this is, of course, partially the fault of media, partially the fault of cancer culture, and all these different things. But what I find crazy is I remember walking down some bus stop in my local area, just going on my way to the gym, and then seeing this poster there. It was a poster of Uncle Sam, but it was sort of like a Frankenstein, and it said, "Are you a communist? Well, you best get your things in order then, and then you best get organizing," or something like that. It was like an advertisement, and I'm like, fucking seriously? Really? Like, how fucking privileged can you be that that you can put this up and not get fucking jailed for it, or that people will look at it and think of it as, oh, well, I guess that's their form of ideology. I may not agree with it, but that's their ideology. It's like, no. Hang on a second. This is the worst type of extremism there is. Obviously, alongside Nazism, or perhaps even alongside Islam, if you really want to go down there. But it's sort of like, fuck, this is where we are now. Where that it's that double standard. So I that's actually a very interesting point that you were both talking about. Also, not to go on a complete tangent here as well, but one thing that you just mentioned there is, what you said, like, him and I might be more knowledgeable about the like topics of the esoteric and things like that. One thing that I will have to say about that, and I'm sure as a follower of black metal in particular, you'll always see these things with the occult. One thing about that is that there's so much depth and knowledge that you can learn from, but also what I like is staying within the practicality of life, because that's where shit happens and that's where shit gets done. So you have a lot of people who are constantly, they've got their heads in books, but they haven't lived a fucking life. They don't know what it's like, so that's all good if you can, and this is coming from someone who is very much interested in those topics, and the and the esoteric and the occult and different religions, and not just not just exclusively like a left-hand path kind of a trajectory, but also even the monotheistic religions. I think that there's some degree of value in every single one of these, and if you really look at it, you'll see that there's truth in all of them, which we've obviously touched upon before. But what I think is really special is that you're still going to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk, because there's a lot of people who fucking, they'll be able to recite all these things and all these texts, and then they'll be able to speak in Latin, but they've never had to deal with a real life situation or a conflict, or they still, they'll still act like a child on social media, and there's these things. I think there's more value to that, or more importantly, they've got zero physical capability, which is absolutely essential for not just men and women, but especially men. So that's the school of thought I am from. I think it's all well and fine knowing about these things and having strong spirituality and knowing about astral projection and things. These are all topics I can get into, but first and foremost, you got to know how to live. And that's my stance on that, really.
Yeah, I would agree. And what my experience has been with a lot of people that are don't have that balance in their view is they tend to become so completely invested in the idea of the occult and spiritual matters and things like that it almost becomes like a different form of, we kind of joke, Dawes and I, about people, on the fringes of the very far left that, are LARPing, that these revolutionaries, and it's kind of the same with anything that people just kind of take to too far of an extreme, especially nowadays. And, that is true of people that get too deeply into, esoteric occult stuff. But just one point around the question around communism and Marxism, and I've made this a couple of times. I may even have made it when you and I've spoken before. But what I find just completely and utterly detestable and offensive is the fact that I completely agree, first and foremost, that Nazism is disgusting and should be, it should be reviled. It should be something that we don't tolerate in society. But what I don't understand is how on earth does Western society look upon the swastika the way that they do, and yet the hammer and sickle, you can walk down Camden High Street, there's people selling T-shirts with it on. And you're talking about an ideology that was responsible in China alone, by conservative estimates, of killing over 35 million people. That's conservative estimates. Some people say it's near 100 million. Then you throw in Pol Pot, you throw in everything, all the human rights abuses in North Korea, and the argument is always comes back, that's not real communism. Okay, well, are you going to suddenly turn around and say then that therefore that it's a valid argument to say, what happened in Germany, that wasn't real Nazism? Of course it was, and of course it was fucking real communism in those places. If not, how many more times are they going to get to try it before they prove to themselves, hey, this is a fucking stupid way of managing a country?
It's the thing I always say, man. I think, first of all, your analogy is spot on, and secondly, as I've always said, perhaps this might be ad nauseum to anyone who's listened to me, but I think this is just a result of abundance and freedom. The simple fact that you can even exercise that is really a sign of the fact that you are living in a free society. The fact that, you can publicly criticize leaders in such a ways, or even, like you said, sell T-shirts with that kind of symbolism on it. I mean, I kid you not. I was walking down the street. Again, like, I seem to see a lot of shit on the street here, and I'm an observant person as well. I don't find myself, just walking around and existing in a bubble. I like to look at what's around me. I'm always observing people, and naturally, as well as a creative, every time, like, these impressions, create little sparks in me as well. But in line with what you just said, as well as me seeing that poster, I also saw this giant fucking poster of Che Guevara outside this shop. I was walking down, and this is like a grocery shop. It's not like, hey, we sell fucking extremist shit here. No, this is, and that was so fucking bizarre to me. Like, no one has attempted to take that down. No one has gone there and said, hey, what the fuck are you guys doing here? Do you know who this is? And and yet, like you said, you get that weird sort of backlash against the... well, it's not a weird backlash. I guess some of it is granted. I think freedom of speech is... we both stand on the same fucking page on that 100%. Free speech absolutists, 100%. People should be able to express their ideas. It's a free society. That's how democracy works. And equally, I do also agree that those thoughts, you should be able to take responsibility for them as well. Okay, now, cancel culture and silencing people, that's one thing. But I do like this sort of confrontational aspect of it too. So if you really think that, then you should come in the middle and you should stand by it. That's why I don't get it when bands pull out of a lineup just because someone's fucking distant cousin one time wore a Burzum shirt. It doesn't make fucking sense to me.
Well, like our mutual friend, they once played a show with Inquisition, right? So they have to have all their shows cancelled.
Right? Exactly. It's so fucking bizarre to me, that kind of mentality. It's like, I mean, first of all, you don't win wars by withdrawing from battles. That's never been the case in history, and that's always been my stance with Trivax as well, so I don't care if we get invited to, I don't know, whether it's let's say, as a hypothetical example, if we get invited to play Steelfest, 100% will fucking play it. If we get invited to play some Antifa festival, 100% will fucking play that too. Provided people will have us, of course. But my point is that I know exactly what I think. I know where I stand. I have got no fear of hiding in a corner like, oh, what if so-and-so thinks what I think? That I don't care, and if I don't... What I'm saying is that I have a problem with people sort of like swaying around things, and then trying to mold into what's acceptable, because it's when you do that, it's when you self-censor, especially, that you create these environments where all of a sudden one extreme end is okay, and then the other side of the coin, which is just as bad, is frowned upon. And if you go towards it, then that's a bad thing. And this is sort of like a bad symptom to me, because this is like it's sort of like totalitarianism. It's the wolf in sheep clothing. I think people gotta be so fucking careful with these kind of things, and what they allow themselves to think and feel, and it's like, you decide what's the right and wrong, and you should be able to take a stance on that. And if people are going to give you shit for it, you should be able to stand up to that too. You don't always have to apologize. And maybe if your idea is shit, then you can apologize for it. But if you genuinely think that, then why are you backtracking? That's the part I don't understand.
For me, any system is wrong that, firstly, that infringes upon people's right to free expression. And when I say infringes upon it in a way that is done to the detriment of others. Like you raise up one group at the expense of another. You place one group's right to offend. You prioritize one group's right to offend over another. And then the other thing, obviously, for me, who I wouldn't call myself a libertarian, but I certainly don't believe in big government at all. I think government, from my perspective, is incompetent. They are staffed by incompetent people with very little real world experience, and I don't understand how anyone can think that they're capable of doing anything doing anything at an expert level, or like at a level where your and my tax money is put to best use, where we're getting the most value out of the taxes that we pay. And you can just look at the National Health Service here in the UK for an example of that. I think right now the statistic that I read is I think the NHS have received an additional 15 billion in funding, and yet the lead time to get an appointment with a GP is the longest that it's been, I believe, in 30 or 40 years. People who are, or the number of people with life-threatening illnesses who are dying because of delays in treatment is at the highest point that it's ever been. So they get given more money, and yet they can't provide it an even remotely better, significantly more money, and can't provide a remotely better service. And to me, that tells the whole story. Not to dunk on anyone who works for the NHS. I know there's a lot of people that work there that are good, work there with good intentions, but they are not the problem. The problem is the fact that it's run by the government, by government bureaucracy, and government bureaucracy is, by its very design, ineffective and inefficient. And the bigger it gets, the worse it gets. So, yeah, that's the simplest way to sum up what I believe. Don't mess with my freedom. I ideally don't want to have to pay any taxes, but I certainly don't want government sticking its beak into every single thing that I do.
Okay, so very well put. And regarding the NHS, I guess this is the episode where we're gonna have to spill some beans. Okay. So let me clarify something to you, and this might be interesting for anyone else listening as well. I've touched upon this with you previously, saying I can't talk about it. I can't go into details. This time, I'm going to talk about it. I'm just not... I won't be able to reveal my sources, but I want people to trust me as best as they can. And they don't have to. They can think I'm making this up. But regarding that particular subject and what the government is actually putting towards the NHS, here's the thing. For example, they'll say that about 15 billion is going to the NHS. Okay. Does that mean that that 15 billion is going directly to getting new equipment, getting more jobs, getting more courses? No, it does not. What that means is that a lot of that, now I don't know the exact amounts, but I would presume very large sums of it are going to other companies that are acting on behalf of NHS. And these other companies have nothing to do with healthcare. And see, I knew that there was something that was going to be interesting about this episode, and here it is. I'm talking about it. I didn't plan on talking about this, but here we are. So a lot of those companies, in fact, are marketing companies, right? So back in 2021, when the 119 was around and the vaccine line was coming out and people were getting jabbed, do you think that who do you think was answering those calls when people were calling 119? Do you think that was the NHS? Or perhaps those calls were answered by people who were on minimum wage, sat at home on their laptop, who had gotten that job without any interview, without any background check, and they were working for a marketing company and they were using VPNs to work on behalf of the NHS. And here's another thing to throw on top of that as well. It's a real spanner in the works. On that same system, there was no features put in place where people could report vaccine injuries. Okay? I know this because I may or may not know exactly what that system looks like. Okay? The protocol was that you would be told that if you have any problems with your vaccine and you need medical advice, you should go to your GP. Subsequently, all of the GPs around the country were advised that if people had any issues with the vaccine, they needed to call the 119 line. So where does this leave us? This leaves us at a point where people are going in loops endlessly, and thousands, if probably not millions, of calls regarding injuries and deaths were basically thrown in the void because people had nowhere to report these things. And of course, you couldn't sue the government, you couldn't sue the pharmaceuticals for this either. So that's a very important thing that I want people to really think about. So when they say that, so and here's another very interesting part about it. Those job roles, you couldn't search them online. The only way you could get that job was through referrals from a friend. And what was the incentive? You would get £100 if you referred a friend who would then go and work for them. Okay? And this was the same for the track and trace service. This was the same for the vaccination line. And then this was also the same when they needed ID checks for vaccine passports and things like that. They were training those same minimum wage people to basically learn how to do ID checks and all these things. And what's interesting is methinks that many of those billions went to those governments, went to those companies, and rather those company owners who were close friends with the Tory government, who then, as a way of justifying the budget that they were handed, would create these jobs. And that's what the British public had. Okay? So all of this business about, oh, safe and effective, oh, we're doing the right thing, it's all a lie. When they were coming on the news and saying something like, oh, we're keeping a close eye on all these things and making sure that there's no injuries and this is all safe and effective, that was an absolute lie. And even people who were working with these marketing companies, I won't name who, but these people were saying that, oh, wow, I can't believe I just saw Boris Johnson lie on TV. This is not what we are seeing on here. So, you see, Jackie,
well,
I'll
give you some interesting statistics about the NHS, and this dates back to an article published in 2017. So it's I would argue the problem is even worse now if you judge it by the drop in quality of outcomes. But This was a study that had been commissioned about financial waste within the NHS. So this is a couple of examples of where money is wasted in the NHS and how much. So 160 million pounds on pills that patients don't need, 100 million on unnecessary legal bills in cases where the NHS conceded, 300 million in infections after hip and knee replacements, 300 million in unnecessary hospital administration. That would probably also include some of the outsourcing that you've just referred to now. 432 million on management consultants, 1 billion as a result of doctors ignoring NICE guidelines on treatments shown to work, 100 million for management consultants to drive reorganization. So that's on top of the additional management consultant bill. 1 billion in unjustified price hikes for medicines. 1 billion paying over the odds in hospital running costs, such as cleaning and electricity. 1.23 billion for compensation and legal fees paid out in cases of negligence. 2 billion paying over the odds for the basics, for example, toilet rolls. And then one additional example it gives you, it says with a membership of more than 12,000 NHS finance managers, which again, you've got 12,000 people working in finance and you still can't get that waste under control. Fucking mind-boggling. It then says the HFMA's turnover is generated chiefly by charging hospital trusts to send their staff on its conferences and courses and to play the operating game, a fun day-long board game designed to simulate the running of a hospital. The HMFA is ultimately funded by the taxpayer.
Yeah.
So, again, I think that the thing that a lot of people don't understand when it comes to talking about these sorts of things, they get... I've said this. I've spoken about this quite a lot now on my podcast recently, but it's this thing where human beings have been conditioned into, or people in the West have been conditioned into, responding to everything with emotions first. So when they start hearing anything negative about the NHS, people have this incredibly knee-jerk reaction to it. They don't understand that actually, when you start unpicking everything about how this works, and how this is put together, there's almost subterfuge in the complexity that they've created around the way that it's structured, and within that complexity is where people are able to steal like there's no tomorrow. I mean, a great example: paying over the odds for the basics, $2 billion. I come from a country where that sort of thing has led to the ransacking of our national grid. It's led to the ransacking and the bankruptcy of our national airline. People can just look into the Eskom fiasco in South Africa, the fact that, you intermittently have rolling blackouts every single day now because of just how badly, things like tenders being given to friends, paying, 20x for toilet paper and things like that, all that kind of shady shit. Same thing with South African Airways. And the exact same thing is happening here. As soon as you create that degree of complexity, you give people license to steal. I mean, how many mafia stories have we watched where they talk about how, the federal government have released X amount of money, in order to build, X, Y, Z bit of infrastructure, and then they're there skimming off the job. I mean, watch Sopranos, for God's sakes. It's a story, but that's basically how it works. And what people completely forget when it comes to talking about taxes or thinking about who they vote for is that's your money. The government might call it revenue, but revenue is something that you get in exchange for goods or service. The government is providing you nothing, zero. They are taking money. They're almost allowing you, especially here in the UK with how high our taxes are, they're allowing you to keep a portion of your salary and going, you can survive off that, but we'll probably come and take more at some point when the coffers run dry. And then they take that money and they use it however they want. It's like in America, people are angry now about the fact that salaries are being paid to folks in the Ukraine with US taxpayer money. Not only is it insane that they will only give $700 to people whose homes have burned down in Maui, but they're sending billions to the Ukraine, but it's fucking illegal. You can't just take taxpayer money and divvy it out to the rest of the world however you want.
Yeah. We in Iran, we always jokingly call that Khalifa's bag. Is when you're just like taking public money and then just like spending it on wherever you want. It's the Khalifa's bag. But I agree. It's totally fucked. But I will also say as well, just coming back on the topic of the NHS. Listen, the idea is fantastic. I think that is such a noble system to want to have in place. But you also gotta recognize that as good as that idea is, and as much as we are still, I say we, I mean the UK, are still way ahead of a lot of other places in the world, especially America, when it comes to that healthcare system and getting seen. You know, it's amazing what we have access to. Um, you know, like you think of stuff like nuclear medicine, you know, where it's like one single appointment will cost at least like, I don't know, probably close to $1,000 just for the medication, and then there's like another grand or two on top of it as well, just for the machinery and things that they gotta run. Or how much MRI scans run cost us like per like 5 minutes or something like that. It's crazy amounts how much these things cost. I think an MRI machine costs something close to like 20 grand a day just to run and then just to go through the appointment. So, you know, that's all really amazing that we have that, but you also have to understand that there's clearly meddlings by the government themselves to push for this to be privatized down the line, which is obviously that's a very cunty thing to do, but also it almost feels like it's inevitable. Like, of course, when they're in that position, they're going to be pushing for that to happen because otherwise it's just not as interesting to them. So I do also think, and I have spoken to a lot of people who are within the NHS, and I've spoken to them about this, and a lot of them seem to be of the same mindset that a lot of this is a lot of these fuck ups and how broken the system is perhaps intentional to an extent so that it can be privatized down the line. Now, we could obviously debate that part, but there is that idea as well. You know, it's sort of like we've got the best thing imaginable when it comes to healthcare, which is an important thing. But also, I'll say this as well, right? You've got the whole thing of healthcare. Well, what is the point of that? Well, on one hand, it's preventative measures, but mostly what it is used for is to fucking treat people, right? Well, if people just fucking had their shit together and didn't eat so much garbage all the time, if they actually moved around a little bit more, you wouldn't be even needing that service as much as you are. So it wouldn't even be costing this much.
Yeah.
You know, like I get that you'll have things like accidents and whatnot, but even that will come down to, I'm sorry, but a lot of that will be because of drugs and alcohol. Okay, otherwise you wouldn't be getting so many people with fucking fractured bones on every Monday morning because they've been a fucking twat on the weekend and got fucked up and now they need an x-ray on their asshole. You know, like it's like there's all these different things that you have to also take into consideration. So it's almost like it's not just the healthcare system that's broken, but it's the entire fucking system that's broken. The fact that you've got aisles dedicated to cereals and chocolate and sweets, that tells you everything that you need to know. And that's what people buy. Everyone who goes grocery shopping buys those things that are just full of crap and full of seed oils, full of sugar and refined carbohydrates and everything that you don't really need in your body. Never mind the glyphosate and everything else that's in the grains. And people are just eating that every single day. So day by day, you're slowly poisoning yourself. And then all of the pressure is long term dropping on that healthcare system. What are we gonna do?
Well, I mean, I think with regards to the pressure on the healthcare system, or the reason why they're not, you know, generally speaking, healthcare, and this is true of the US, it's true of everywhere. Healthcare is not really attacking the root cause of a lot of the problems that it ends up treating. Again, I believe that's by design. There's no two ways about it. I mean, for me, just the very fact that there's this crazy drive towards plant-based and veganism, when it's been proven to lead to less healthy outcomes than than having an omnivorous diet or balanced omnivorous diet. That to me is a great example. Put people in a position where their immune systems are compromised, where they're naturally going to be sicker, where their bones have less density, you know, and ultimately lead to more money. People say, well, the NHS is free. No, it's not. You pay an exorbitant amount of tax for it, and that money goes to pharmaceutical companies, you know, and various other suppliers of the NHS. And they don't want the faucet to stop. As a matter of fact, they want the incentive to, or they have the incentive for it to become even more significant. Thomas Sowell had a great, or he's had many great quotes, but one of the best quotes that he had about economic policies and just kind of generally how the government kind of runs the economy or runs different institutions. As you said, economic policies need to be analyzed in terms of the incentives they create rather than the hopes that inspired them, right? So there was a hope when the NHS was created that we want to give people, we want affordable healthcare access for all, which I completely agree with you is a very noble, cause to pursue. But unfortunately, when you create an institution like that is so gargantuan, so bureaucratic, and so bloated, as I said, you then create incentives for people to steal money, mismanagement, etc. But you also do not, unfortunately, create the incentive for any real reform, because many of the decision makers that would be in positions to be able to reform it, that there is no incentive for them to reform it, because if they reform it, then the money faucet gets turned off. It's like in America. The American government is so openly, so nakedly corrupt now, and so nakedly inefficient. But there will never be any true reform. It doesn't matter who sits in the White House. It could be somebody from the GOP, it could be somebody from the Democrats. It doesn't really matter, because the incentive is not there to change it. Because every single person who's in that, who's in the Senate, or who's in the House, they're all feeding at the trough. There's a reason why so many of them go into those institutions and they come out 10, 20 years later, and all of a sudden they're 50 million or 60 million strong. That doesn't make any sense. If the most you could ever earn was $180,000 or $200,000 a year, given taxes, given the cost of medical care and stuff in America, how on earth are you suddenly worth 50 million or 60 million? So, like I said, incentive leads to behavior, and unfortunately, the incentive is too strong at all levels of government. Like I said, not just healthcare, but for the rot to remain. And I can't see it changing, because, as I said, and on one hand, I can understand, therefore, why people are kind of trying to look to things like socialism and communism as the answer. But I mean, recognizing that the root cause of a problem is the government, and then your solution is to give the government even more power, more scope to control your life, that to me is just ridiculous. That's like having somebody shoot at you and you say, well, I know the way to solve this problem. Give that man another gun.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. So, in line with that, when is old Jackson going to be running for prime minister?
Never, mate. I don't think they're ready for some of the ideas that I've got. I mean, my stance on crime, for one, would be way too harsh for anyone in this country, certainly to find palatable. Again, I think the way that they deal with criminality in the West right now, it's got to a point where it's like it's compounding into something that's so chaotic and so out of control, and it's gotten to a point where, I mean, this happened just in your neck of the woods. That autistic girl that was, accosted, or not even accosted, she had her door kicked in by 7 police officers for calling for saying that one of the police police woman looks like her grandma, who's a lesbian. Seven cops turn up there, but yet that same county has some of the worst knife crime and some of the worst violence in the UK. No one's dealing with that.
But you look at, if I remember correctly, back in 2019, was it 18 or 19, in Rotherham, Sheffield, it was like a whole group of, I think, Pakistani guys who got done for pedophilia and perhaps even trafficking, and that to me is like, you should be shot in the head. No, it's
they estimate
it's
that
what it should be, but I think they got like 3-4 years in prison or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's even worse than that for folks that don't know anything about this. They estimate that it was well over 1,000 girls. It could even be as many as 1,500 girls. There was also a campaign of intimidation against any parents that caught wind of what was going on and tried to do something about it. So, naturally, we also unfortunately have a lot of spineless cowards in this country and in all of the West. So there weren't a lot of people that tried, but those that did were intimidated. But there was also a member of the Labour Party that openly said that the media should suppress the story and that the police shouldn't take action against these people because it would be bad for social cohesion. So, again, it comes
Right.
back to what that idea that if one group of people feels hard done by, you build resentment in them, and then that resentment leads to true hatred. Do you think that not taking action against a criminal is going to be worse for social cohesion than actually dealing with somebody? I'm pretty sure that entire the entire rest of the law-abiding Pakistani community would have cheered when those fucking scumbags got thrown in prison.
Yeah. Do we know the name of that person from the Labour Party who
I'm
said
gonna
this?
dig it up. Hang on fire.
Yeah, you're the new Jamie of Iblis Manifestations, whilst also being a guest.
Dude, I'll tell you one of the greatest things that I've ever done for myself on my podcast. Got myself an ultra wide screen, so now I can have person on one side and I can start checking my facts. Because one of the things I noticed with my shows, as the show got bigger, I personally just started to feel more pressure to make sure I'm not making mistakes when I quote certain things or when I'm saying certain stuff, because it's very easy when you're in the heat of conversation. I don't think, I think people don't necessarily realize that, how easy it is when you are, you're in the middle of a conversation with somebody, especially somebody you get on well with, and that you, that you're in kind of the swing of things, you're in the flow of your conversation, to say something and not be 100% accurate. And I do find, there's increasing pressure now to make sure that you get those things right. Because
I think
people seem to kind of pick through shit that you say. So that person.
But that's good. I think that's good. Like I said earlier, I think it's good to be able to take responsibility for what you say, and the
person in question was Naz Shah, and her quote was something to the effect of, basically, people should shut up for the sake of diversity. So it's nuts.
Fascinating. Well, here's my take on that. I think anyone who's anyone who's dealt in any way, shape, or form with trafficking, in a sense of actually causing it or being a part of it, or anyone who's a convicted pedophile, I think there should be a death sentence for that. There's not much other things that I feel that way about. I actually find the death sentence quite harsh, but I think that's an idea. That's kind of like the way I look at the whole issue of pedophilia, is that it's sort of like, people who've got severe diabetes, and then sometimes you just got to cut off the leg. I think pedophiles are the leg that you just have to cut off. I'm sorry that, because I recognize that it's a sickness, and I'm sorry that those people are sick, but they need to be cut off before they get to anyone else and corrupt children, and corrupt the future of those children. And then it's like a disease that spreads, and I'm sorry that they're born that way, or that if at any point they got contaminated by that, but they just have to go. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. And it's very strange to me why anyone with a conscience would want to downplay such a thing. Like, for example, like, I've not even watched the film, but Sound of Freedom came out, and then all these magazines like Rolling Stone is coming out saying like, oh, it's this far right thing. It's like,
it's an alt-right conspiracy theory movie. It's like, no, it's not.
That's not a good look. That makes you look like you're involved in this kind of thing, okay?
Yeah.
And let's not forget that this is also a totally fucking propaganda medium of media outlet that is, that they had the fucking Boston bombing guy or on the cover of the magazine not too long ago.
Yeah, he was.
And it's like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And then obviously they took this really extreme stance in the lockdowns as well, like, oh, get vaccinated, all blah blah blah, safe and effective. So it's like, those things I always question it, and then it's like they always make it seem like, oh, like, this is what I say, Jackie, just to sort of like bring this into like a little window here. I was thinking about this the other day, and I was actually thinking of like making a post, like a full announcement about this, in case I become unreachable at some point in my life. So here's the statement. If at any point you will see my Wikipedia page, class me down as some kind of far right, alt right conspiracy theorist, know that I sacrificed myself for all of you. If you ever see me put down as a philanthropist, know that I sold out every single one of you for my own gains. And I stand by that correctly. And I will say that now, okay? We'll see how the future unfolds, but here we are. Now I've said it now.
Well, I think the phrase far right, it's it's the boy who cried wolf. It's something that it's a phrase they've used to, or they've co-opted into creating some sort of boogeyman, on mostly online boogeyman that they can scare people with. I've said this many times before. I grew up in apartheid South Africa. I know what the far right looks like. I had a classroom full of people that I got into many, many fistfights with, who were genuine. I mean, like they were 14 and 15 years old. They grew up in white supremacist households. They had that exact same mindset. So I know exactly what that looks like, and I can assure you, you're no white supremacist or no far right lunatic, nor is Russell Brand, nor is nor is a great many of the people referred to as far right. I feel like that meme about everything to the right of Stalin is now considered neo-Nazi. It's like it's kind of that's basically where we're at with in a lot of people's minds. Again, to your point that you made earlier in the conversation, it's mostly people that are online. It's not people that you meet in real life, and that's true anyway. Sure. If you walk around in the US, even if you go and walk around in California, I bet you if you talk to 10 people, 7 folks are going to agree with you about things that most reasonable, decent human beings would agree with. But
for sure, yeah.
The online culture, the folks that sit at home and have nothing better to do than trawl Twitter for the next person they're going to try and take down, they're going to try and cancel. They've gamified the idea of ruining people's lives. And I think that's truly disturbing. I think, again, the fact that the incentive exists for people to do that, I think is a complete disgrace. To your point about the death penalty, though, that's probably, again, one of the first things that perhaps might preclude me from ever being able to run for prime minister. I've got some pretty firm views on that. In my view, I wish we could live in a society where prison was rehabilitative. I've not seen any evidence to suggest that it does. And I have far greater empathy for the family whose life is ruined because, somebody shot someone or somebody knifed somebody whilst they were, trying to mug them for their phone or something like that. Like, from my perspective, I believe that if you toe the line day in and day out, you pay your taxes, you do the things that all of us don't like doing. Paying taxes is one, but every one of the mundane rules that we're expected to follow, or that society expects us to follow. If you do all of those things, you work a job or you run a business, and you work your nuts off to have a couple of the finer things in life, and somebody tries to take that away from you, or take away, even worse, your ability to enjoy that. So I'm not saying if somebody robs you, they need to be put to death, but if somebody would try and compromise your ability to provide for your family by killing you, or something like that, as far as I'm concerned, that person's right to life is void. Nothing. I don't think people like that. I don't think they belong in society, and I don't think that I don't understand why we're apologetic for those people, or trying to understand. Oh, well, this was the reason why they came from a poor background, or this happened and that happened. Here's where things went wrong for them. I don't give a fuck. Like, what about the family that's left behind? What about the kids who aren't going to have aren't going to have a father, or aren't going to have a mother? What about the family who's been robbed of a child? So, I'm not so extreme as to believe in an eye for an eye, but I certainly believe for, rape, especially child rape, and first degree murder, as far as I'm concerned, people like that should be eradicated. They shouldn't be in society anymore.
Yeah, well, I think that's a fair point. I think the tricky thing with that is sometimes crime, or rather proving a crime, isn't as black and white. So it's not like we've got this sort of goggle-eyed view of everything that happens. As I'm sure you have seen, there's been so many people, especially in the States, that have been wrongfully convicted of certain things. Like particularly in the case of guys like Damien Eccles. I'm sure you're familiar with him, like those kind of cases also exist. In fact, there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of times, if I may give pushback on that, as much as I also think that's probably a good idea, to keep those people away. There is the idea as well that sometimes a lot of times, in fact, the police officers, and the police force will want to, or the judicial system will simply just want to have a convict, just so that they can justify their wages, just so that they can justify their position, because
Well, so they can close a case. They're incentivized by the number of cases they close, so they jump to conclusions about somebody. So no, I do agree with you, and I do recognize that that's an issue. I do think though, in that scenario, as in many things that we're talking about, if you there is no perfect solution, right? If you completely scrap you completely scrap the idea of the death penalty, then what do you do with the folks where it's provable beyond a shadow of a doubt? Now effectively they become the taxpayer's burden, and they sit in jail for in many cases now not even their whole lives. They're there for 10, 15, 20 years, and then they're back out on the streets. That to me is not enough punishment for them. But again, the trade-off is, unfortunately, there's also many cases or many examples of people that aren't, that weren't guilty.
Yeah, I do agree, and you know what? I will say as well, regarding death penalty for people committing murder, like first degree murder. That's also, that's an interesting one. Like if you can really prove that someone did that, but also there is a downside to things like that as well. And the downside would be that we would have never had the Thulian Perspective, Varg Vikernes' YouTube channel, and stuff like that being made throughout history, which has been an endless source of entertainment.
That's true as well. Yeah, no, that's true as well.
Yeah.
Look, I think some of it is cultural as well, right? So I mean, South Africa is an incredibly violent country, and every single person in South Africa knows someone who has been affected by someone in their in their family being killed. Thank God, none of that has happened to my family. I've had a gun pointed at me. I've had an attempted carjacking, but that's about
How
as
old were
far
you
as
when that happened?
Ironically, it was a week before I came to the UK. I had a broken windscreen on my fucking piece of trash car that I was driving, and I drove into the industrial area of the city that I live to go get the windscreen fixed so that my parents could sell the car when I was gone. And I had the windscreen fixed. I'm driving home, and I've got my I've got my window turned down, my arm out like an idiot on my cell phone, and I stopped at a traffic light, and I just literally just saw from the corner of my eye the gun coming through the window. And guy grabbed the phone, said, "Get out." And I have no idea why, but just instinct just took over, and I just floored it, cut across the red light, sped home as fast as I could. I've never used so much profanity in my entire life. And I mean, literally, I got home after, it must have been about a 10-minute drive, and I was just shaking. It was like the most insane rush of adrenaline I'd ever experienced in my entire life. But I mean, as I said, that's a minor inconvenience for a lot of folks. People that live in Johannesburg, or people that live in some of the rougher parts of Cape Town, I mean, they've experienced far worse. But I do think maybe, again, I recognize that maybe some of my views on crime prevention may have something to do with growing up in a country where criminality is very, very significant, and when it strikes, unfortunately, it's very severe, and it's often very violent and leads very tragic as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I tell you a story in a similar one that I had happen to me? I was 15 years old, and this was in this was in Tehran, in Iran, and I was kind of at that age, or I was going through that period of my life where I was totally like on the cusp of breaking into the other side, of like constantly going into wild territories, doing things that were crazy. I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I did a lot of things that could have easily gotten me killed, anti-religious things, but other than that, just like sheer vandalism, because I was like, it's that moment where you realize, like, holy shit, I can control what I do. Haha, fuck, so you just start basically burning everything down around you, because it's like, it's the it's the first time you learn to basically, it's like you realize that you're your own authority, and it was like that was the age, like around 14, 15, where I was like, oh, okay, I can, this is under my rule. So but obviously there comes consequences with certain things as well. So I was already kind of in that trajectory, but the situation that I found myself in, I wasn't like, I didn't do anything extreme. All I did was look at this guy one time. It was me and my friend Sohail, and the two of us were sat on this bench in this park. And we'd never been to this park before, but, we like to explore around, especially we were mostly looking for other girls to talk to. But, that was just our fucking entertainment back then. So, yeah, I'm 15, so we're sat there, and him and I are talking, and then this guy walks through. Like, my memory of it is very vivid. Yeah, he was sort of a skinny guy, long-ish, but not too long, of like sort of like brownish, dark brown hair color, a few spots on his face, gray t-shirt and blue jeans. And he walks in, and I'm looking at him, and I'm not thinking about anything, like I've not had an encounter like this before. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, And he then turns around and he looks at me, and we lock eyes. And he's like quite far away, but we still lock eyes from the distance. And the reason why I was looking at him was because he reminded me of Maniac from Mayhem, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm looking at this guy thinking, oh wow, he looks a lot like Maniac. Not that you would fucking find Maniac walking around the park in Tehran, obviously, in 2009 or 10, maybe 10, I think it was. But then I lock eyes with this guy, and then he looks at me, and then we sort of lock eyes, and then he gets kind of like aggressive. And me not knowing how to deal with that situation, I just went, what? I wasn't trying to be aggressive in return. I just said, what? Because I was confused. Like, what the fuck's he looking at? And then he fucking comes up to me and puts a knife right on my face. And I was honestly, like, at that moment, I froze. I was like, okay, well, this is weird. This escalated quickly.
Yeah.
Like, this motherfucker's walking around with a knife, and just because I looked at him, he's just putting a knife to my face. But you know what? That was a valuable lesson to me. I am almost glad now that happened. Because he was obviously just trying to assert dominance and make sure that... And obviously, who knows what fucking life he had lived that, a simple look to him meant that you had to show your weapons. Like, fuck knows who fucked him up, that's how he had to respond. But obviously, it takes a long time before you can sort of forgive and move past that and learn that that's what will have caused it. But that's also why, like, nowadays, I'm quite, like, even though a long time has gone past since then, that was like, 13 years ago. If I find anyone, like, looking at me, I'm always, like, on edge. I'm like, first of all, that's disrespectful to me, like, you don't look at me and not fucking say anything. But that's why, like, this is the tricky thing, like, we just played Cosmic Void. When I'm at a gig, and I'll have people, like, kind of staring at me, and I turn around, and I'm like, I kind of think to myself, what the, like, I won't say it out loud straight away a lot of times, I'm thinking to myself, who the fuck are you looking at, cunt? Like, do you want to fucking throw that? And then, like, sometimes I realize, oh, this person's just shy and they want to take a photo. So I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine, man. Like, come over here. Like, they take a selfie. But, like, to me, like, that, if I find someone, like, staring at me, I fucking straight, I go to that switch of, like, okay, this person wants to fight. And it is like that in a lot of cultures, and it's just, for me at that point as a 15-year-old, it hadn't dawned on me yet, but it's just these, like, little subtle things, but to your point, I know what it's like, basically, to get that adrenaline go through you, when you have an encounter of that extreme where there's weapons involved, and then someone has that much of an upper hand over you for that moment,
Well, I mean, the thing in South Africa is if, typically speaking, if you do get out of the car, which, very often you get forced out of the car in a hijacking situation. I mean, that is, I'd say 70% of the time people like that get shot. So, and they literally will shoot them for no reason. They don't just get in the car and they drive off. They'll just shoot you by the side of the road and off they go. So, yeah, it's kind of the real shock of it is thinking about it afterwards and thinking about what could have happened. And as I said, fortunately, didn't. But you make an interesting point about the lesson that you learned from it. I think what it did give me is a lot more empathy for people in South Africa who do toe the line. And again, South Africa, you have a lot of poverty, so people do a lot of informal jobs, or they work in what's called the informal sector. So I mean, it's cash in hand jobs. There's guys that'll, for example, stand at parking lots and they'll offer to look after your car, and you pay the money. And the thing that I saw in the place where we always go on holiday, which is reasonably affluent, people are, they're treating these poor guys like complete and utter trash. They're giving them they either swearing at them, or they're telling them, they're giving them R1, R2, complete pittance. And so I made a point whenever I go there now of I'll give people a decent amount of money, and then there'll always be one or two where I'll give them if that guy makes 50 rand in a day, I'll give him 1,000 rand in one go, and just I'll just walk up to the guy, I'll just put it in his hand and say, just hide it, don't let anyone to see. And because at the very least, cool, I can't help all those folks. I wish I could, but at the very least, I know that hopefully, no matter what happens, at some point he's going to think back to the time when somebody came up and did something out of the blue, kind like that for him. So I think that I think that was one of my takeaways from that experience is having more empathy for people that are in that position where you're impoverished. There's all these people with fancy shopping bags and driving nice cars and stuff that are treating you like complete trash, and yet you have the wherewithal to not turn to crime. Because I mean, I know I've given some strong views on how I would deal with criminality, but then at the same time, you put yourself in the shoes of that guy. You go to would I turn to hijacking and stuff like that if I were in that person's shoe? Possibly. It certainly wouldn't be. I certainly wouldn't appreciate people fucking telling me to get lost when all I'm trying to do is earn an honest living in the only way that's available to me.
I totally appreciate that, man. I'm actually a very big believer of that, and it shocks me when a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are almost intentionally harsh to homeless people. Because they're well, your choices made you here. You're fucking, you're a druggie or whatever. And then it's there's a lot of truth related to that. But at the same time as well, it's a very complicated issue, and I think what sort of exacerbates that really badly, especially in today's world, is social media. Because this was something that, years and years ago, let's say in the 90s or even early 2000s, as far as I can remember, a lot of times, it was the thing of seeing people with expensive cars or with shopping bags, walking past you, and then you're kind of in a shitty situation. Is kind of the classic tale of it, really. And a lot of times, this actually happened to someone I know one time, where some random guy just went and scratched the car because they were clearly jealous of the car because it was the best car that was in those row of things. It's just out of jealousy, just gone and scratched it.
Was the owner pissed off at you for doing it?
No, Nice. I see. The owner was very closely related to me, so I would have never done that. But
remind me to tell you something. Sorry, when we just remind me to tell you a story of something I did when I was 7 years old.
Sure, by all means.
Just as we talk about car vandalism.
Can't wait to hear this.
No. Well, I'll tell you now, dude. I've always had this very bizarre sense of justice and payback ever since I was like a real little real little tyke. So anyway,
relatable.
So when I was 7 years old, we had this we had to raise funds for our school, and in order to raise funds, we had these bags of dried fruit, like the Boy Scouts sell cookies and stuff like that. We had these bags of dried fruit that we had to go and sell to people that we knew. So this was still the days when your parents could send you out into the neighborhood and you could knock on doors and go, I've got this fruit, want to buy it. Anyway, so I'd sold all but one bag. Rocked up at this woman's house, knock on the door, and what's her name? She basically just yells at me. Doesn't even open the door. She says, "Go away!" So I'm a 7-year-old. I take massive offense to this, and so I walk into the street and I look at the tar road, and there's this like black puddle that's there. So I think that's oil. She's got a white Mercedes Benz parked in her driveway. So I put both my hands in the puddle. I walk up to the Mercedes Benz and I smear it down the bonnet. I smear it down the sides, and I do a real number on the car. So I start walking home, and I realized this. I need to get this shit off my hands before I get to the house, or my mom's going to be pissed off. So I go to some people that I know that lives, a couple of roads down from us. I say, "Can I use your tap, please?" So yeah, it's fine. You can use the tap. Turn the tap open, and the stuff on my hand starts getting hard. And then I suddenly realize this is fucking tar. Tar that's melted in the road, and I've just smeared it all over these people's car. I mean, thank fuck this wasn't the days of like ring cams and stuff like that, because I mean they would certainly have gotten me doing it, and the beat down I would have gotten from my dad would have been unbelievable. But I often think back to that and think to myself, how fucked off must those people have been when they came there and their entire car is like just these hand smears of tar all down the thing.
Hey, listen, don't fuck with the kid.
Well, it's I watch Malcolm in the Middle.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I watched that, and I say, because my daughter loves it, so I always watch it with her. I was like, if you want to know what I was like as a kid, I was literally a blend of Malcolm and Reese. I was basically like, that's why I find it so fucking funny, because it's like I see so much of the stuff that they get up to in the show. It's like that is exactly the sort of thing that I would have done.
Right, so a bit like, I guess, a bit more also like Junior from Problem Child. Did you ever watch that?
No, I didn't actually.
Oh man, those films are fucking ace. Especially like the first two.
Yeah,
is hilarious. Like this kid, like I related to him so much as a kid. Like literally the whole. It's almost like how do I describe it? It's just this devil kid that just like constantly fucks with everyone. Like my favorite scene is like in the second film where everyone's on these. It's a little bit like actually what you just said, and it's that same characteristic where there's this sort of like a ride in this theme park that everyone's on, and then he tries to go on it, but then he's too short because he's too little and he's still very young, so they don't let him on there, and then they tell him to go away. And then this other girl that he knows, who was like at that time his like main rival, she manages to go on, and then he's like, how's she got on? And then she turns around and shows him that she's got these like platform shoes or whatever, that are quite tall. And then she gets on and everyone's enjoying the ride. So he's like, well, fuck you guys then. So he goes and then like meddles with the settings. So then it goes really fast. And then every one of them just starts throwing up all over each other. And then the whole theme park is then like throwing up. And then there's vomit everywhere. And there's this fat kid who does this massive roll vomit. And I fucking love that scene so much. Because it's just this, it's the spirit of vengeance. It speaks to my soul.
Well, that's the thing. I was never an instigator, but I always had to get even, no matter what. Like that. Like I never started fights. I never did anything, to piss anybody off intentionally. But if they did anything that upset me or made me angry, that was like I have to take somehow I have to settle this.
Was
probably why professional wrestling appealed to me so much. It's like this person for the next 2 months, I'm going to feud with them. It's kind of that sort of thing.
I guess. Well, was the car tarmac thing the most extreme thing that you did then, do you think?
Well, I actually did something way, way worse. I didn't do physical damage, but I'll tell you the story. The statute of limitations has probably passed. So
go on then.
Okay, let's preface it by saying I've spoken about South Africa now. It's pretty violent and crime laden. In the Western Cape, there's quite a big problem with gangs. So you can get away with what I'm about to tell you, knowing knowing that as context. So anyway, one of my best friends, a guy I'm 6 months apart from him. I've literally known him since I was born. There's photos of us together when we were little babies. We were very, very close. We used to see each other every single December holiday. Like December is our summer holiday, so every December holiday we'd see each other. And anyway, one holiday we were 16 years old, so we were 2 years from leaving school. So he tells me about this guy in his class who, had said some stuff to a girl that he liked. The girl, then, decided she wanted nothing to do with him anymore. And, he was really upset and pissed off about that. So I said to him, okay, well, look, instead of fucking this guy up, let's really do a number on him. So we call him up and I pretend to be this gangster out of the Western Cape that somehow got hold of his number. And I tell him that one of his friends said something really racist to one of my friends. And, we basically want to get rid of this dude. But what we've decided is we're going to spare this particular gentleman's life. Like, let's just call him Ryan. We're going to spare Ryan's life, but he has to start selling drugs for us at school. And once that goes well, and that you can hear this guy shitting himself. Once that goes well, then we've got some prostitutes that we need them to start pimping out to the teachers as well. And this guy is like he's like taking it 100% serious. And he throws the phone down. We call straight back. His mom's on the line. We're like, no, he's lying. We never said anything like that. But we were calling just to say, him and his mates need to be better behaved, because they go out at night, they get drunk, and then they're picking fights and being racist and stuff towards the wrong people. And the mom is like, how can you say something like that? And bear in mind, by the way, so I've got all of this on tape, lying at home somewhere in South Africa. So I'm not bullshitting. I've got the evidence for it.
Fuck
so
yes.
We go back and forth. A couple of days later, I call this guy up again. I'm saying, listen, we've put a package in the mail for you that's going to arrive. We need once it arrives, we'll call you again with further instructions. So this is kind of part of our my friend's chores, is to mow the lawn. So we go, right, come to cut the grass, take the grass, let it lie out in the sun. And when it got dryish, we like crumpled it up, put it in some Ziploc bags, stuck it in an envelope, posted it to the guy. So we call back up like, hey, listen, I understand you've received the package now. It's worth, and we say it's worth 60,000 rand. Like if you lose any of that, there's trouble. So we go back and forth about this. Eventually, again, the guy's mom's back on the phone, back on the line. She's called the cops. The detectives are there. They're looking for us, and we've given them like fake names, fake backgrounds, fake stories. This dude apparently was so fucking freaked out by what happened, and bear in mind, he is like a full-blown classic schoolyard bully. Like he was just a dickhead. But he was so freaked out by this that apparently, they still don't know to this day that my friend was behind some of this, or his friend was behind it. But apparently, he'd been telling people at school, like when they went back to school the following year, that there's these gangsters after him, and he might have to go see a psychiatrist because he's so stressed. But yeah, it was like we ran a whole entire campaign, mate, for an entire it was an entire like 4 or 5 weeks. We were calling the guy every other day, like, okay, here's what's going to happen next. And the funniest thing was, though, that I think he may, whatever doubt he may have had when the crushed up lawn and the Ziploc bags turned up at his house, I think that's when he really shat himself.
That's fucking amazing, man. And how old were you again at this time?
I was about 16.
16.
Yeah. So we used to do a lot of prank calls, but I mean, like we made a real art of it. Like I remember calling a guy up once and telling him, there's a manager of a restaurant, saying to him that I'd gotten ill from his food and so had my wife. And the guy's like, no, it's impossible. It can't happen. I said, look, when I was fighting in the Angola war, we often used to shoot cats because there was nothing else to eat. And the steak that you fed me tastes exactly like one of the cats that I shot. And this dude is like, no, that can't be, that's impossible. I was like, he says, oh, please come to the restaurant. We'll give you 20% off. It's like, I'm not coming there. You're going to kill me next time.
Good. I love that, man. Listen, prank calls were the fucking most fun thing ever. When you were like 15, 16, it's stuff actually pretty similar, funnily enough, to what you said. Because we had this one trip back in Iran when I think I was around. I think this was around late 2009. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say it was around December 2009. So at that time, me and 3 of my other mates who were causing so much fucking chaos around the school and then also around the girls' school from the road down the road from us. They were very close. And because obviously, like men and women are separated from like, or like boys and girls rather, from age 7 when you go to primary school, which in Iran it used to start at 7 when I grew up. I think it's 6 now. They separate boys and girls, so you don't go seeing or sharing any classrooms or any school or anything with the opposite sex until you're in university. Okay, so you can imagine how fun university must be over there. But basically, so obviously we're high schoolers at that time, so we used to go to the other school that was like the girls' school, and we used to hang outside, and then just like the girls would walk past and then we'd say hello, or sometimes we'd go to the park further down the road and switch numbers with some of them and stuff. And not really a lot of stuff would happen normally, but it was the thrill and the chase of it. It was really it was good fun. I'm sure you understand where I'm coming from, but.
I was just about to say, dude, I was in a mixed school and I fucking loved every second of it.
Yeah, I would have done. I was pissed, like I got robbed of my rights, but I made sure I made up for it when I first moved to the UK. So anyway, but basically, like the thing was that we went on this trip. And this trip was a total fucking disaster for the school, to the point that I'm pretty sure they burned all the films for it. And this, I think, actually plays a big part into just generally my journey as a musician in general, which I will talk about more. I've never shared about this trip before. So we went to North Iran. We went near the city of Rasht. And this was like basically like a quick trip with me and obviously like all of the guys from our high school who were on the same classes and the same level, like the same year that we had. There was many of us because this was a smaller private school, but it's different kind of private school to what you get over here. So it was us, and then it was like a couple of guys, like our general, like one of the main guys who ran the school. He was a shit cunt. I totally did not get along with him, and he actually sent people recording, to privately record me chat shit about him, and I said the worst things possible because I was. It's quite interesting, I said all kinds of things about his mother, and this guy was like twice my age at that time, if not more, and his son was older than me, and I said his mom's a fucking. I won't go into what I said, but anyway. That was already the dynamic. These are the kind of people I'm going on this fucking trip for, in Iran. And I'm the one metalhead there listening to fucking Marduk. I was so obsessed with Marduk at that point, and Mayhem. This was, this is me, like, being the fucking total black sheep. But anyway, my friends and I, we were causing so much chaos, and then we had, I think the two school owners, from like the girl ones, they had already had a run-in with these guys because of us. Saying like, who the fuck are these kids, who are constantly like hanging around out here, this is not very Islamic or appropriate or whatever. Anyway, so basically they had said that me and these guys could not hang out anymore, but we were all still going on this trip, okay? And on this trip, we took fucking ethanol with us, first of all, so we had this bottle of Coca-Cola that we had mixed with ethanol, and that was our source of alcohol, so we could get drunk, right? And ethanol, for anyone who's unaware, that's industrial alcohol. It's 95%, and it can make you go blind. So that's what we were drinking at 15. And,
Jesus.
Yes. And we were also smoking, and if you were caught smoking, they would like expel you from the school and call your family, and you'd be fucked completely. So anyway, we go on this trip, and then during the same trip, we're doing these same kind of prank calls, where we're calling this guy, like saying that we're going to meet up with him here and we're going to bring all of our guys, basically instigating a fake fight just because we didn't like him, okay? So that was all going down. And then we're drinking ethanol on the other hand, smoking on the other hand. I didn't smoke cigarettes, but I did drink. And I also took my electric guitar on this fucking trip with me. I don't know why, but I just did it. And guess what happened on the last night of that whole stay? And this is, I think, the main reason why they burned all the footage from that whole appearance. These guys, obviously, they went to the praying room upstairs at the accommodation that we were staying at, and this is like a proper praying room. It's a relatively big room. They've got the carpets and like the Persian rugs everywhere, and all these fucking guys when they're like worshiping Allah and blah blah blah, whatever, the deal. But then they decided they wanted to stay there for the rest of the night, and this is meanwhile me and my friends are drinking alcohol. Like that's already like severely punishable. So we go upstairs, and then there's this kid, and he's fucking playing violin and just to like entertain everyone. And then everyone was like, "Oh, Cheyenne, you should bring a guitar. You should bring a guitar. We're all hanging out here." And they're still in the praying room, but mine, okay? I'm like, "Yeah, cool. I'll do that." Right? It's like my first time actually performing properly in front of people at that point. So I go and grab my guitar, and I come up, and this kid's like playing his violin. I'm like, "Fuck off, you virgin," like your mom and dad, fucking, like you fucking pasteurized motherfuckers, So obviously I didn't say that to him, but that's what I thought to myself. And the crowd seemed to agree with me moments after when I started playing. Guess what fucking song I then played to them? At first I played like a really small like melody. I had a song called Lost Dreams that I wrote when I was 14 years old. I played him that. It was the first song I ever wrote. It's really nice, kind of ballady kind of song. And then after that, on the guitar, I turned up the distortion. It's my 12-inch Laney amp. It's very small, but it's got some bite to it. Turned everything all the way up, and I played Marduk's Baptism by Fire on the guitar. Okay, and this is inside an Islamic praying room, surrounded by like 30 other guys, and then our the guy who was sort of the authority, he was supposed to be the authority. It was his job to get the kids in line. And I had an altercation with him later when I kicked a bottle of piss at our Quran teacher later that same year. This guy, he doesn't know how to react to the music. He thinks it's good, but all he knows is like Persian fucking pop music. So he starts going like this. Everybody clap. Like that in the middle of, as I'm playing Baptism by Fire. So all the kids start clapping, and then this other guy who was the school runner, he starts like punching him in the side, saying, "Shut up, what the fuck are you doing?" And all of that was captured on the video. And I think it was only later that they realized how actually blasphemous it was to be basically playing Marduk of all bands inside an Islamic praying room.
I was about to say, I thought you were going to say something like Freezing Moon or Dunkelheit or something like that.
That could have worked too, sure.
I was about to say, same outcome. That shit will be, that footage could be worth quite a lot, mate, once LOR Burns Out comes out. And it takes off as much as I think it has the potential to take off.
So that footage has all been destroyed, is what I'm saying. And it's honestly... Fuck I would have loved to have had that footage.
Yeah.
There is footage of me playing Dark Funeral's Diabolis Interium at the dormitory of that same trip, and I'm wearing like a shiter as well, which makes it so much better. But I've got that, and that's a good quality footage. But the official one that they had, they destroyed it, and it breaks my heart that I'll never get to see that, because that was like a total triumphant moment. Playing Marduk inside an Islamic praying room and fucking living to tell the tale. That's a big deal. I actually did that, and I stayed alive, and no, I didn't get killed for it. But anyway, and thank you regarding the album as well. It's being streamed tomorrow via Black Metal Promotion, so I fucking can't wait for that to come out.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very, very cool.
Thank you.
I'm gonna profile it on the podcast this or next week. So episode 198 it'll be on. So like I said to you, everything like this, there is some thinking behind certain things that I do. Like you'll notice I'll if there's a band I like particularly, I'll not only have their music on or have people from the band on, but I'll have the subtle hints, the T-shirt that I'll wear on, during a show. Like for episode 200, I've got a Drew Goth T-shirt on. Was it a Drew Goth? No, actually, episode 200, I had a Stellar Master Elite T-shirt on because I thought it tied back nicely to episode 1. I've had Trivax on for other big. Who was it? Like I had a big guest on, and I wore my Trivax T-shirt for that.
Oh, was it Black Braid?
No, it wasn't, because I got the Trivax shirt after Reaper Fest, and Black Braid I'd already had Black Black Braid on.
Oh yeah.
Black Braid is interestingly enough, the guest I got the most shit about. Not
The
Nas,
most shit about.
not Brock, no, Black Braid. Some fucking idiot writes a
Brock's
comment
a sound
like
guy.
he seems like a perfectly reasonable dude to me. As I said, he got drunk and he did something stupid. But I mean, Christ, it's like I said on the show. I think it's ridiculous that people are making such a big deal about it when, everyone we grew up listening to, whether it was Guns N' Roses or whether it was Pantera or Metallica, I mean, not a fucking tour went by that they didn't have some issue with security, and it was always some sort of drunken scrap. It's these things just happen. People do stupid stuff when they're drunk. That's not excusing it.
Wait,
but
which Brock are we talking about?
Hey,
which Brock are we talking about?
No. I'm talking. I'm talking about John from Black Braid.
Ah, right. Okay, sure. I was going to say
Brock from Panzerfaust. That's a band I've had some pushback over, but that's specifically because of the fact that I was strongly supportive of them being in that freedom convoy. And also, we share many similar views on things like the vaccine and on vaccine mandates and stuff like that.
And I think those guys are fucking great. And you know what? Like, talk about guys who genuinely care about freedom. Because obviously we played a show with them last September. Last August. We did a show with those guys. And I noticed that I think both him and one of the other guys from Panzerfaust, they had this patch that said Kafar, the one that's in Arabic that says infidel. And I said to him, that's a cool patch, man. And we had a conversation about that. And he was like, this is dedicated to you guys, pointing at me and Soli, and that's the whole general, the principle of it, and I very much respect that in people, it's sort of like, I don't expect that kind of thing, but it's good when people from over here, and by here I mean the West in general.
Yeah.
It's so fucking valuable to me when I recognize that there are people, whether it's him, whether it's yourself, who can recognize that freedom is not just this one-dimensional thing. It covers a lot of different things, and sometimes freedom means that you're gonna have to step over certain people's feelings, okay? But that's what it's about. A lot of it is just being able to put up with ideas that that you might not like, and then there's always this general narrative, especially in the case of Islam, that and there are a lot of things I like about Islam, but there are a lot of other things about it which we can probably talk about that, but it's always very strange to me how the left-wing people will be defending it, whether it's Islam is the single most right-wing ideology in the contemporary world that we live in. No questions.
No, I completely agree with you on that, and I always find it very amusing how the especially the identity ideologues, they seem to kind of they bounce up against that one sort of what would be the word? Like that one conundrum that they don't know how to deal with. Like, we saw in Birmingham, for example, those parents, they're Muslim parents that said, you're not teaching my kids anything about gender ideology whatsoever at school. And, it was a whole big thing. And the media try to kind of, they sort of close their eyes and they, stick their fingers in their ears and pretend like it's not happening. But from all of the experience that I've had, meeting with, being friends with, people that are practicing Muslim people, I totally agree with you. I don't know of a single group of people that are more conservative. No, I mean, they make, in terms of like being socially conservative, they make some of those fucking nutcases that I grew up with in South Africa. They make them look calm. So, that is just how they are. And again, I mean, you see it happen all over the US as well. You've seen more and more like Muslim parents standing up saying, we're not going to, have you teach our kids all this bullshit, or we don't want X, Y, Z happening in our communities. And it like, people don't really seem to, those same people that, will accuse you of being Islamophobic if you dare to criticize anything whatsoever about the religion, they don't seem to know what to do about that.
Absolutely, man. And you have to think the interesting thing about Islam in particular, like I said, if you want to sort of only take part of it and part of the ideology and apply it to your life, I think it's so valuable. But when you take the full thing, is really an absolutely incendiary ideology, especially to have as such mass scale as we're having now, because it's an ideology that's first of all pro-slavery. You'll hear a lot of Muslim clerics who are serious about what they're doing and what they're saying that, well, that's a part of Islam, so it must be okay. It's like this was a part of the entire world, and I guess like it has been a big part of the world. But fucking hell, in 2023, you're turning around and saying that, oh yeah, slavery is okay as long as it's in the name of Allah. What the fuck are we doing?
Seems like it's they got it going on. Those guys, yeah.
And the thing is, I feel like there does seem to be some form of like a concerted effort from a lot of the right wing people who are saying like, oh, let's us, like, especially when I say right wing people, I mean Christians, okay, purely Christians, who are saying, oh, maybe we should try and sort of come on the same page with these Muslims, because then we can fight all of these agendas, and all the ideology. But one very interesting thing that seems to be happening is that it seems like a very much one-sided thing. And there's actually a verse in the Quran, I think it's 551, that basically says something along the lines of do not take the Jews and the Christians as your allies. Then it goes on to say something along the lines of they are the allies of each other. And among you, whoever who basically takes them for allies shall be regarded the same, which is basically not an ally, which basically means someone who has brought shame to Islam, which then means that that's someone who deserves to die. So to them, they're the only entity in the world that really should exist. Okay, so all this idea of peace and whatnot is bullshit, because on one hand, they will be approaching it from this perspective of, hey, we're going to come and invade what you've got, whether you like it or not, because it's in the name of Allah, and that's a pure thing to do. But then they'll also play the victim at the same time, saying that, oh, like some of our people are being deported, with being treated like shit. And, Donald Trump, banned all Muslims from entering USA in 2016. And it's like, listen, motherfuckers, you're doing this to yourself. You cannot have an ideology which inherently takes away the rights of other people from living and breathing, and then expect to be respected for it. But what's, again, very bizarre to me is that the people who will then go on to defend Islam are the left-wing liberal people, when they're literally like on the absolute opposite side of the coin. I mean, if you look up any Muslim cleric, just go on YouTube, go on Google, search any Muslim cleric, right? And you can look for the viewpoint of Islam on LGBTQ, and they will always say exactly one thing, and it's that Allah made humans as binary, and He is the only entity which is non-binary. So by saying that you're non-binary, you're comparing yourself to Allah, and that's absolute blasphemy, and you should have your head chopped off for that. So
I was going to ask you actually, because that is something I've noticed as well, and weirdly enough, it seems to have really gained steam with Andrew Tate, claiming to be a Muslim and or claiming to have reverted. And then, Patrick Bet-David kind of seems to be pushing it a lot on his podcast as well. And by the way, anyone watching this on YouTube, this fucking fly, I've got in my hand my fly gun. As soon as this cunt comes into like appropriate, like you're just going to hear a snap, and then this fucking thing's finally going to be dead, because it is driving me insane. So it's like I'm trying to keep my composure here. Anyway, but yeah, it seems like Patrick Bet-David and Andrew Tate in particular have really kind of been pushing that and sort of trying to make it seem like, all for one and one for all. That was never my. I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea, but that's never been my understanding of generally speaking what the view is inside of Islam.
Yeah. Well, that is they're fairly strict about that, So they're to them, it's just them. When they say,
It's coming.
Now I'm about to recite a text to you about how Allah said you should not kill flies.
Exactly. This thing remains cocked, mate. Ready to roll.
Absolutely. Well, should we have a quick pee break and then we'll come back to it?
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, you were saying.
Yeah, so no, what I was saying was when it comes to my podcast, the point of getting somebody on is never to have like a gotcha moment, or never to have somebody that's I'm not interested in a viral moment that says, this is the moment that Jackie changed Cheyenne's opinion about capitalism or about Islam or whatever the case may be. It's in service of the fact that I like their music. I want people to hear their music. I want to have a conversation with the person in the band. So and then the side goal, obviously, as I said to you before we started recording again, and you experience it with Trivax, I try, especially now that I'm able to get bigger guests on, I try and sandwich bigger guests, or I try and sandwich like smaller underground bands that I really like in between the bigger guests, so that they get a bit of that rub, and as much as possible, I'm getting their names out, and it's been fucking great to see, man. Like I've noticed that the Drugoth album is doing really well. The Sick album is doing really, really well thanks to that, or thanks to that approach. Quell, there was definitely, with this last Quell record, there was a lot more excitement and a lot more positive energy around it than there was for any of the previous Quell records. I know, because I spoke to Connor about it, that the return they saw from everything I did for Antichrist Imperium last year was more than the return they saw for their campaign in Decibel. So that's been always one of the biggest goals as well. It's like, how can I take bands that I believe in and that I love and elevate them and make people kind of recognize their music and pay more attention to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, listen, man, you've always been very good with that. I know this might seem like a bit of a wild transition for everyone listening, because obviously we got talking before the recorder was on, but that's the topic that we landed on. And I think that, one of the most valuable things about Into the Necrosphere, like admittedly, it's one of the things. It was, obviously I've always been a very big podcast fan since maybe 2016, 17 onwards, when I first got introduced to, what even is a podcast. I've very much been into it anyway, but it was until I listened to your show and also Alan's Agitators Anonymous where I was like, oh, maybe I could do this, And obviously it was after I actually appeared on your show, and then I did a bunch of other ones close to it around the release of Into the Void. I was like, oh, cool. There might be something here, and might be the artistic tool that I was missing. And one thing that I think is so valuable about what you do with Into the Necrosphere is the fact that, like you just sort of alluded to there, it's not a sensationalist type of journalism, because the episodes are long. You don't even, I sometimes do this for Iblis, but you don't even do that, where there's no short clips. If you want to watch an episode, you watch the whole thing, or you listen to the full 2-3 hours. And I think there is a value in that. So it's sort of like the fact that you've been able to build the following that you have done, that goes to show how interesting it truly is. And you've got like your own like cult following just with this podcast, just because you share underground bands, and obviously you share your own opinions and things as well, and every now and then there might be the odd pushback, but I think that's good, because that means that people care about what you have to say, and it's also a sign of how much you care about what you're saying, and how much you care about the underground and all these bands. And I think what you're doing with your podcast is an essential piece in the if you want to call it the scene of metal. I like to think that I'm able to offer certain things here as well, but sort of in like a different perspective from the musician perspective. But I think your position is perhaps even more rare, because there aren't a lot of people who dedicate that much time and that much perfectionism into making these 2-3 hour long episodes and keeping them coming out consistently on a weekly basis, and it's not like you're always just using names to get your podcast bigger. You're constantly supporting smaller underground bands, Trivax included in that, like obviously we've grown a lot since my first appearance with you. But still, even then, that sort of thing, I think people really need to pay attention to that. A lot of people sit around and complain and say, oh, the scene is dead and stuff. Well, what we need is more people like you, and that's what gets shit done.
Well,
So I commend you
think the
for that.
whole. Oh, I really appreciate that, mate, and I think there's been a lot of, if I reflect back over the last 200 episodes, there's a lot of things that have occurred as a result of the podcast that I never in my wildest dreams thought would happen. One of them is this community that I've built around the podcast of people that I kind of jokingly, but also endearingly refer to as the Legion. But then equally also, the Horsemen, that was something that was completely and utterly organic. It was, I had Mike on the podcast. Mike and I hit it off. We started getting in the habit of sharing each other's episodes. Then I noticed, okay, well, now Necromaniacs are starting to share my episodes. We started I started speaking to Carl. I started speaking to Brandon before they started their podcasts. They started theirs. And then I was like, okay, they've always been so good at sharing my stuff. It seems only fair that I'm sharing their content when they start. And then I jokingly said on one of my episodes, we're going to need to come up with a name for these guys. And I thought of the Horsemen from wrestling lore, and immediately said, we should call them the Horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. And that's where it started. But it's awesome because it's people I've developed great friendships with, friendships I value very, very highly. But like I said, we've also built this organic community up from nothing, and hopefully it makes people feel like, in a world where, as you kind of alluded to a while back, you feel alone and you feel a little bit isolated. You think to yourself, actually, there's a lot of people that think the same way that I do, and that have the same passion that I do for, certain bands or certain styles of music, and we can do something that is adult. We don't have to do something that kind of caters to this mass market, this mass audience. Like I'm perfectly happy for my podcast to service a niche within a niche within a niche, because that's exactly what it is. It's like, okay, metal, then you've got extreme music, then you've got people that are into extreme music but are also clued up enough that they actually pay attention to what's going on in the news, and they pay attention to what's going on in the world. And then equally, they don't mind somebody who's, could be pretty opinionated. But at the same time, when I'm opinionated, I take the piss out of myself continually, especially on the news rant as well. I mean, the news rant kind of started as well as people seem to always comment on stuff that I would say in reviews and stuff like that. And then I started seeing all these react videos everywhere. And I'm like, most of the stuff is fucking boring as hell. So why don't I just do something that I would want to watch? And so that's how the news rant started. And it also gives me a vehicle to either take the piss or talk about something. Sometimes I'll talk about serious shit. Sometimes I'll take the piss. But it's also, you kill two birds with one stone, because I'm going to read that news anyway. So now I'm just reading it whilst I'm recording the episode and listening to the songs. One dude gave me the best, and it's a guy I know from years ago. He gave me the best compliment. He's like, listening to your podcast is literally like being back in your bedroom in South Africa, but same listening to music and talking shit. That you run your podcast exactly the way you used to run your room and your house when I knew you. So
that's fantastic, man. I think there's a lot of value in that.
It's it's incredible. I can't believe that I'm at episode 200, and I can't believe that there's so many people that actually pay attention. It's so fucking crazy to me. Like, you have it as well. Like the number of people that reach out and that go, I went through XYZ. I just had a dude a while back send me a long message about how he's been in the hospital with a very serious health condition, blah, blah, blah. It's Into the Necrosphere and Iblis Manifestations, and everything went black that got him through it. And he just wanted to say thank you. And I'm like, Zuby said once, people that have podcasts or YouTube channels that only have 3,000 to 4,000 followers, he's like, put 3,000 people in a room and see how big that is. And then you realize how big your audience actually is. You don't have to have 50, 60,000 people checking out a show to realize how big it is. And I mean, I have infinitely more people listening on the audio platforms than I do listening on YouTube. So my audience has actually gotten a bit bigger than that. But then at the same time, like I said, I'm very happy being in that niche within a niche within a niche, because I also don't want to get to a point where I'm being scrutinized, and I don't want ever in my life to see a fucking YouTube video where it's like so and so reacts to my podcast. I'm not interested in that. my day job precludes me from wanting to be interested in that. I don't have the time for it, and secondly, it just attracts a bunch of fucking crazy people. So I want to do what I want to do, get interesting people on, help push and promote bands I like, and have something that is as pure and true to loving music in the as the first and most important guiding principle as it can be.
And it very much shows, man. I think that's an extremely valuable thing, and it's like that, that's what I like about these kind of things, is that you can take it or leave it, right? And then that's the point that I was commending, was saying that you're not going off of this sensationalist viewpoint. The audience that you have built is built over time with people who have watched the show, obviously tuned in and enjoyed what you do, and I think that's really great. And you know what? This brings a very interesting idea to my mind, which I have thought before, but I never mentioned it to you. Okay, so
you and I get on OnlyFans.
Well, listen, that's the second time you've said that, man. What the fuck is it with trying to get me to do an OnlyFans page, huh? There was a dude. I don't know if you saw that interaction that I had with someone on my Instagram a little while ago when I was doing a Q&A.
No.
Oh, yeah. Someone... So this was the interaction. I'm sure I still have them saved somewhere, because when you post stories, they get saved in like, you can add them to highlights or whatever. So I probably have access to it in that way. I basically did a Q&A, and someone said to me, would you start an OnlyFans? I wasn't sure if they were trolling or not, but I still responded to it anyway, saying like, well, fuck
hell
no.
Yes.
I said I would never do something like that, and I said, without getting into the details of why, it's just, that's not my style, it's not my standards. And then someone else, trying to be a fucking smartass, replied to that, saying, oh, you're so something, you're so arrogant. Who the fuck wants to pay to watch you naked or something? And then I responded to him with, I've paid more to watch your mother get turned into a yogurt pot. So,
first of all, dude, have you seen the fucking freaks that are making money on OnlyFans? So, I think there's room for every person and every body and build of every stripe on OnlyFans. But
I think it's fucking sad. Like, there's this thing of like glorifying it. It's the same thing as free speech for me. I say, okay, you've got the right to do this, but you should also put up with be able to put up with the scrutiny or any kind of criticism of it as well. And for me personally, obviously, I would never stop someone from doing it. I don't think someone should have their right taken away from doing it. But personally, I think it's a sad and it's a very creepy thing, because you never know who the fuck is on the other side of that. And as someone who is... I very much value certain spiritual things. How do I put this the best way? I have a spiritual viewpoint of things, and I know that there's something to human interaction that's more than just what you'll see with your eyes and just when you speak to someone. There's more to it than that. There's like a deeper connection there. And also, I understand how sex magic works to an extent. And I understand that when you're thinking about one person or one topic or one subject, and you reach a level of orgasm, you're feeding into that in a way which, I guess I'm really getting into the esoteric here. But when you do have orgasm whilst thinking about one specific thing, one particular topic or one goal, but in this case one person, that creates some type of a metaphysical bond. And this is why I think it's extremely dangerous what kind of bonds you're forming with all of these people, because your energy is no longer protected, because you're selling that part of yourself to that person. Yes, it might be just an image of you, but it's in the same way that, like, for example, with even from a scientific perspective, if I really wanted to try and dissect it that way, you look at the whole idea of electrons always being aware that they're being observed, so that when you look at them, they actually change their format. And even if you take a picture and then go look at it, but then observe them, even through future, they still know that they're being observed. Okay? It's a very interesting thing, but that's also why I think that stuff like OnlyFans or someone watching you in that intimate setting and someone jerking off was thinking about you, that is dangerous, because there's something being created there, I think. Now, it's not the same as that person showing up to your house and, fucking trying to do whatever. I mean, I'm sure there's been cases like that as well, but there's something else there, in the fourth dimensional world, where you're connecting with that person. And do you really want to connect with these people just for, I don't know, like fucking $10 a month? Is that really worth it? Like I'm obviously very I'm a private person, and I'm very conscious of who I let into my life and what kind of energies I want to deal with. But that's something that always makes me uncomfortable. And this is all besides the moral aspect of it, okay? This is just from a spiritual and esoteric perspective, where I think having an OnlyFans account is an extremely dangerous thing to do.
Well, I think the first comment that I have to make is there is an extraordinarily strong connection in that case between myself and my high school biology teacher. So...
Right on. Right on.
But
but that's the idea of sex magic. It's that you can,
I weaved many a spell when I was 14 and 15 years old.
So when you're saying casting hexes and slaying posers, that's what's really going on.
I mean that quite literally. But no, look, I'm with you. Like, I don't think people should be stopped from doing something, but I think, don't be surprised when you have to deal with the adverse consequences. I've actually, when I was a free swinging bachelor, I was seeing a girl who was on OnlyFans for a couple of months, and the stuff that she would show me, like messages that she gets and stuff like that. I mean, she laughed at it, and I thought it was fucking hysterical. But it is nuts, mate. I mean, simp cultures. I think maybe that's why I have so little respect for any kind of simpish behavior that I see, because I see what it leads to. There was one dude who wrote a very impassioned, I mean, we're talking like multi-page essay to her about how he wanted to be shrunk down and live inside her vagina, and he would like daily like give her these diary entries about what it's like, as he imagines living inside of her. One dude that she told me about, there was the most insane thing I've ever come across my entire life. At least as far as this is concerned. So she told me about a guy who paid her £3,000 to get on a webcam with him and insult him for a half an hour, like call him every name under the sun, asshole, you're worthless, you're a scumbag, and stuff like that. And I said to her, Jesus, is it like some really rich banker, or like just a guy that can't get his thrills any other way? And she said to me, no, it's a DPD driver. He used his Christmas bonus to pay for that. And I was like, holy fuck. She's like, it's like, that's, he probably only makes 30 grand, 35 grand a year. And he was so infatuated with that fantasy that's the only way that he could live it out I think part of the degradation is actually the act of giving all of that money to her, in order then to receive in exchange, being insulted for, a half an hour. But to me, it's just, weak. It's weak men that do that. I think the internet's made it a lot worse. I think if you wanna laugh and cry at the same time, just go and read some of the comments on any porn star's Instagram or anything like that. The fucking trash that the guys post on there is just astounding to me. It's like one guy after the other. The porn star will be completely glammed up, pouting. She posts a selfie. She goes, having an ugly day. And then there's 900 cunts that respond, oh, what's up, babe? I'm here for you, hun, if you need me. It's like, dude, cringing, seriously, so bad, do you think out of the thousands and thousands of bullshit messages that people are posting, she's going to look at you and go, hey, Ahmad, you seem to me that you're the one. I'm going to... This a guy has unlocked the code finally. It's like,
you know what it is? It's that same mechanism of the semen reaching the egg. It's that we think that as people, we always think that we're gonna be the winner somehow. Like we're all trying to Like
Yeah.
this is the function of a lot of men it inherently built in us is to try and win over a woman and procreate. Now, this in a social context becomes far more complicated than that. A lot of times it's not for the sake of procreation, but we have to acknowledge first and foremost that that is what's inherently built in the DNA of human beings, okay? Now, all the other stuff, social constructs, you can talk about that, but this is the very core of it, is to procreate and to continue. Now, I think that a lot of times we feel that we're just special. Like, of course we're gonna win. You know, of course. That other person, they don't have what I've got. You know, I've always got the thing. I've got the edge. You know, I'm definitely gonna win. And then there's that thinking. You know, that unfortunately I think social media capitalizes on so fucking well by making you think that you're the hero of the story. And you know, sometimes as well, that's not a terrible thing because people also, I mean, it's really the ego that is tapping into, and people also achieve great things because of their ego. I'm not saying to deny that completely, but we also need to understand is how these online platforms truly work, and it's that it's not a one-to-one connection that you're having with that person. And I think, you know, like to your point as well, I agree, and it's that yes, there are people who exist out there who do this, and there are people who purchase OnlyFans and do all the, and then there are people who then sell content on there. That doesn't mean I have to respect what they do, and especially for the, I have far less respect for someone who subscribes to an OnlyFans account than someone who creates an account. Okay,
Yeah.
but I think someone who subscribes to that account, because at the end of it, yes, it might seem on the surface that they're just watching because they want to watch, and you know that's the thing, and that's where it ends. But that's not the case. Our DNA is, we're built to want to win. We're built to want to procreate and continue. So when that person is looking at that woman, they're looking at them as a potential partner. Somehow, some way, that's in their mind. Even if it's like 10% of what they're thinking, I think it'll be majority of what they're thinking. That's why they're paying, because to them it's like a ticket to entry of, oh, I might have access to this now.
Mm-hmm.
They're viewing that content creator as a potential partner, and I think that's a totally fucked up thing, because that person, people who are like that, people who fall into that kind of trap, they may never really have the opportunity to have a real partner and be able to really build a relationship if that's how they're going about it.
Well, I mean, I think it's evident when you look at how much less people are actually getting together now, right? There's birth rates are down all over the West. You know, people are getting together less, less, and less. People, you know, men are complaining about loneliness. There's this idea that on online dating apps, I think something like 70% of women are going after the top 10% of men. So there's a lot of what you've said. You see playing out practicality in the real world, but you know, I think unfortunately for most guys, I don't want to sound like Andrew Tate, but I do actually think there's a couple of things that he does say that I do think is correct. And one of the biggest one that I learned from personal experience was, you know, I spent my life, by the early part of my life, like my 20s and my 30s, engaged in very self-destructive behavior, and I was engaged in that self-destructive behavior because of one particular thing that happened to me, where I was made to feel like a fucking loser. And I, being the kind of person that I am, I wanted to repeatedly prove to myself that I wasn't the person that I was made to feel like on that particular moment. And what I realized after, you know, various things that happened in my life is, I think I said this was the first time I was on your podcast. Like, if you wanna succeed as a man in life, with women, in relationships, or whatever floats your boat, the only thing you can do, focus on being the best version of yourself, that idealized version of yourself that you see. Like when you talk about being the main character in your story or the action hero in your movie, think about what that looks like and focus entirely just on that. If all you do is focus on personal excellence, then everything else just becomes very, very easy. And not only does it become easy, but all the decisions you make become more considered because you're acting from a place of abundance rather than a place of thirst.
Mm.
So, when I met Paige, or not met Paige, but when Paige and I got together, and I decided I wanted to make her a part of my life. I decided to make her a part of my life not because I was desperate for a relationship. I had loads of other bitches, but I canceled all of that stuff because I knew being with her made me happier than anything else that I could attain. She added genuine value to my life. She brought something out of me that nobody else was bringing out of me, in terms of like bringing the best parts of my personality to the fore. But that only comes from divorcing yourself from the idea that you should be pursuing somebody, or you should be pursuing anything other than, like I said, than personal excellence. When I made that decision in my life, every single thing in my life became better. I started the podcast, my career took off. I met the woman I'm going to marry, and hopefully spend the rest of my life with. I made loads more friends, including you. But it took, I'd say, in my life, 36 years of real, like, banging my head against a brick wall. And unfortunately, I think a lot of guys either lack the self-awareness, or they lack the counsel or the guidance to actually to ever come to that point. And that's why you still see these fucking fat slobs in their 40s sitting around jerking off to porn, spending whatever money they can on OnlyFans. And as you say, they live in this weird vain hope, like somebody who plays the the Euro Millions every single week, hoping that I'm going to get that exit out of the life that I hate. They live in this weird vein. I hope that if they subscribe to that girl on OnlyFans, she's going to notice them when they write, "Oh, you're so sexy." She's going to go, "Oh, wow, I can't believe it." He finally said the magic words. And it's just fucking ridiculous. And the
I
thing is,
think
it's not helped by the fact that in the Western culture, like real proper masculinity, or the pursuit of masculine ideals, is so villainized, because that makes it even worse. That actually encourages simp-like behavior. And again, being a simp, especially even if you have a woman, I'd argue, especially if you have a woman in your life, it makes it even worse, because they fucking hate it. Like they might respond to it positively for a while, but then they realize that they've got you figured out, and the next thing you know, you're out in your ass, and then you're sobbing and crying about how I gave her everything. It's like, yeah, but you were a fucking doormat. In terms of the supply demand equation, you never quite understood that you are essentially sand. You are like every single other person that she has ready access to at any given time. All she needs to do is go on Instagram and post a selfie where she's pouting and saying, "Having an ugly day." And there's at least 20, 30 guys messaging her immediately saying, "I'm here for you if you need me, hun. Oh, you don't believe the haters. You're beautiful." So,
Yeah, listen, I think there's a lot of very valuable things that you just said there, so I want to try and unpack that. The most important thing that you said was acting as in terms of, like, you have access to abundance rather than acting on thirst.
yeah.
Okay, I think that's actually very fucking important. But also, what I would say is a lot of guys in today's world, and I think this is in an increasingly, like, it's all, I think a lot of this comes down to dopamine as well. Like, we've got such shortcut access to dopamine through modern society, whether it's through our food, whether it's through what we watch, or whether it's through social media, or whether it's through porn, whatever. That unearned dopamine is exactly the thing that's making us rot from the inside, because dopamine is meant to be there to encourage you to go further into something. It's to make you wanna push forward, but that is being hijacked by consumerism. Okay, one thing that I can say that is the biggest problem, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is, like, for example, when you're making the case of guys that are, like, let's say in their 40s, sat at home, fucking jerking off, getting takeaway food all the time, not saving their money, and fucking, subscribing to all these OnlyFans models and whatever. That is, inherently, yes, there is that idea of, oh, I might get somewhere, that there's that expectation. But that's the worst combination on the graph of action that you could look at for a man, which is to do the least and expect the most. But where you really want to do is do the most but expect the least. And that's how you'll actually be able to excel in your life. And this is something I've, of course, become aware of myself in the last, especially 4 or 5 years of my life. And it's something that's progressively been getting better. I think I do agree with you, and when you're talking about the idea of masculinity is not something that's anti-woman. It's not to go around and then say, oh, women are beneath me or whatever. No, it's embracing your own value, your own strengths, and also being able to make decisions. Like one thing that a lot of guys really struggle with now, and I'll admit that some years ago, this was something that I had serious issues with, and it was only until I could sort of see the reflection of that in my own partner. Because that's one thing. If you want a mirror, go get a partner or a girlfriend, and that there's no better mirror than that of who you are and what your actions lead to. Okay, and that's something that we need to work on as men, is that we need to be able to make decisions. Well, first of all, what do you make that decision based on? What you really want. Okay, well, what do you really want in life? Huh? Most people, if you ask them that, they have no fucking clue. And you try and ask that further. Well, what I want is, well, I want to have like a house. I want to have a big house. I want to have a car. Well, why do you want that? Well, I don't know. I guess that's just what I want. And it's like these things. Most people are lacking the why to live their lives. And I think, and that is a crisis in itself. You could easily say that. But I think that's kind of where we're also going wrong, is that there is that lack of someone who is able to lead. And especially, listen, in the case of women, they are beautiful. They are able to do some amazing things, and they're the support that you can get from you know what they always say, behind every successful man there's a good woman, and that
without a doubt,
that is absolutely true, and there's millions of examples of this, and I can always see that in my own life as well. But you can, like, you have to earn that position, and you earn that position by knowing, first of all, what you want in your life, and you have to learn that by knowing how to lead in a situation. So you don't want to, like, let's put it like this, and I'm sort of repeating words of other women who I have spoken to, or some even heard speak, but you don't want to dictate what they do. You don't want to control what they do. But you do want to lead the situation so that they feel safe. Because as soon as a woman feels like they're in a position where all of the control, all of the responsibility has dropped on them, that's when things can go wrong, because that they're naturally not made to feel that way. They're naturally not made to just go astray and just do whatever. And that's why in the case of those guys that throw themselves at these models, when you're throwing yourself at someone, first of all, they're not going to see any sort of security in you. So you need 3 types of security. You need emotional, physical, and financial security. If you're not able to provide those, that woman is not going to find you a stable place. She's going to think, and she's going to act strangely, because you don't know how to keep a stable environment. And that's the job of a man. When we're talking about masculinity, it's to be able to provide safety and security for all of those things that I just mentioned. So it's not to be woman hating, it's quite the opposite. It's the exact opposite. It's to be able to work as a team together. And that's when we all excel the best. I've said this on here before. The best people that I know in my life, the people who I respect the most, and this is not coming from a place of a bias or a preference, but rather pure observation. These people are always people who are in long-term relationships. Many of them are family men, or people who have their own kids. Without a shadow of a doubt, also the most successful that I know in my life as well. Yourself obviously being included in that list. there is something to that. There is power to that, and we live in this world of, oh, get with the modern stuff, and then just like forget about all of that. And that's exactly the thing that's killing us from the inside, is getting further away from those traditional values.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. And as I said, it's getting away from traditional values and replacing them with values that are toxic, and that are counterproductive. Don't lead to any sort of progress. Leave men feeling miserable, resentful, and it comes back again to the most dangerous men in the world are weak men. It's not. It's they talk about toxic masculinity. The true toxic masculinity comes from men that are weaklings and that are that are prone to lash out because they feel resentful about the fact that they're not getting the life they have these instincts about what they want or what they want to attain in life, but they don't have the wherewithal to actually go ahead and do that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, no, I'm completely with you on that.
Yeah.
But I think being a parent, being in a long-term relationship, I think all of those things are that they do change you quite substantially as a man. And I think it's I mean I would strongly recommend parenthood because it's an incredible experience. It's a very humbling experience. And yeah, like I said, I think a man should get into a relationship when he's at that place where he feels he's on his, at the very least, on his way to attaining that idealized version of himself. I think if he doesn't, then he's just setting himself up for misery. And, again, I speak from personal experience there, because you think that somebody's going to try and is going to fill that gap for you, or is going to plug that hole in your soul, but it's not going to happen. All you'll end up doing is coming across as either desperate, pathetic, a loser. Then you're going to, it's self-perpetuating because you're going to be rejected, and then you're going to feel like even more of a loser. So you need to get you need to be in the right mindset, I think, to be able to enter a relationship in a healthy way.
I think so too. Absolutely. I mean, also just to take a quick step back as well. Earlier, you mentioned something that you said that something happened to you that led you down a self-destructive path for a long time. See, I haven't forgotten, man. I pay attention.
No, I can talk about it. I've never spoken about it really to anybody. I think I told my dad this, and that was about it. It's a pathetic story on its face, but it's the thing is, I think why it took me so long to acknowledge it is because of how pathetic it is on its face. So, it's first love, mate. Rejected by spurned by the first love of your life. And being conditioned by stupid, Hollywood movies to think that grand gestures is going to win the person's love. When I was 17 years old, and I remember my senior prom. I had all these grand plans. It was a complete utter fuck up, and there was like one particular point where I went there with a girl, and I think when it couldn't have gone any worse. Then I, cack-handedly try to have the conversation with her about, is there going to be a chance that we get back together again? And she told me to fuck off in as pretty much those exact words. And that stuck with me my whole life. And I didn't realize that that so much of my behavior was tied back to that one particular incident until much later in my life. But I spent a big chunk of my life womanizing, flirting, like constantly trying to prove to myself that I wasn't that guy. Not unknowingly, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was only when I realized it, and that's the concept of the superego. When I realized it and I saw it for what it was, and I admitted it to myself, and I admitted that weakness to myself, then suddenly you can start to repair and you can start to focus on the right things. But it's I honestly, I say it feeling almost embarrassed and bashful about it, but I think it would be amazing if people were actually honest. It'll be incredible how many men have their big vast chunks of their lives dictated by what happened to them when they first fell in love with a woman.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it doesn't help that we've been conditioned into doing all of the exact wrong things by the fucking trash movies that are on television, and the Hollywood idea of
Yeah.
romance and stuff like that.
No, you listen. You're very right about that. I appreciate you sharing that. And I've had my own fair share of these experiences that, like you said, it defines you. Like a simple
Mhm.
rejection from, even if you're like 12 years old, that will fucking stick with you more than you can ever know. And it takes a lot of time, a lot of healing, a lot of sometimes doing the wrong things to really come around and realize that. What was that for you? Like how did you sort of come around to it? How did you first acknowledge that that was the thing, and how were you
So
able
I
to
think the
move
first thing
past
I
it?
acknowledged I acknowledged was the need to focus on myself, and I think it was then when I finally kind of had things in my life on track, it was actually going back, reflecting, and trying to pick out, and with a more sober mind, like what was it that got me to, what was it that got me thinking that way in the first place. And the more I thought about it, the more I reflected on it, the more I kept coming back to that one night, that one particular. It was actually, ironically, the night that Princess Diana died.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so I just kept on coming back to that same moment, that same thing in my life, and the more I thought about it, the more it became crystal clear to me. It's like this has been like the one thing in your life that's been like one of the biggest drivers. It's I think it's growing up with a certain mindset and like a certain competitive drive, which I've always had, and having been put into a situation where you're not just at the back of the pack. Like there's the back
Mm.
of the pack, a wall, the desert, and then you, and then and just not knowing how to, not being emotionally equipped to deal with it. Um,
I have to say, if I may sort of try and psychologically unpack this, because believe it or not, I've been through very similar thing that also dictated a big part of my life. I would dare say one of the main reasons Trivax exists, and that's the path that I went down, actually relates to that similar type of experience. Um, I think, like, just from a very human perspective, if I almost want to step outside of the human thing and really observe us, as we know, everything does relate down to sex and procreation, as I already said earlier. That's like literally everything that we do. It is that, like everything that we do, whether it's with the money and the status and the job and the whatever, it comes down to that, okay? Maybe you and I doing this podcast right now, somehow, in some weird way, still relates to that, okay?
hmm.
Because we're still leaving, it's some kind of like a legacy thing here, okay? But what I would do to observe that, based on how I observed myself when I experienced rejection at a very young age. I was like, what, 11, 12, and that was something I never got over for a very long time. And it, like you said, dictated a lot of those things. And I can unpack that if needed. Well, first of all, I'm saying that we share that point completely. Okay, so don't feel that. Like, I know how pathetic it can feel. Is like,
Mm.
fuck, of all the things, this one small thing is that's what got me. But I understand it, and I think the conclusion I came to when I was sort of trying to dissect my own psychology and like, why do you fucking care? Is, I think, just like I said, there's that idea of procreation, and there's something in us, I think, that first person that you've been with, like something happens there psychologically or with the chemistry or spiritually, even. Something happens that is near impossible to get over.
Mm.
Okay? And it's almost like everything that you do after that is almost trying to replicate what you already had. And it's a feeling that you cannot describe. It's something that haunts your dreams. It like there's, and it's like you're always trying to recreate that buzz, that feeling. It's like, oh, where is it? Where is it? I can't find that anymore. And there's that. It's a very, very powerful thing that I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but we as humans are conditioned that when you make that first connection to that same level, something happens between two people. And I think also from a more mundane, cynical perspective, It's the fact that that's your first chance in life at potentially procreating. So receiving rejection could perhaps trigger a subconscious idea in your mind that tells you this is where you end. You will never be able to have children. You will never be able to pass on your genes. And your life, your lineage dies with you. And I think, as extreme as that may sound, I think that's why it hurts so much. That's a big part of why, especially rejection of the early type of rejection, compared to like if you got like, if that happened to you now, I'm sure you'd be like, oh, fuck off, bitch, like I'll obviously you wouldn't be in that situation because I know you're in a happy civil partnership, but if that happened now, you wouldn't care. But that early stage in your life, I think it triggers something. It's an ancient part of our DNA that's like, if you get rejected, that means you'll never be able to have sex. That means you'll never be able to procreate. That means you'll never be able to have children. That means your bloodline and lineage dies with you. I think that might be a part of it.
Perhaps. I think there's a degree of validation, that require, needing validation in it as well. Like, again, if I unpack my own psyche, I mean, people often talk about women being, being or needing validation. But I think men are just as bad, if not worse. And I think especially if you're if you're of a certain mindset, like I extrapolated out into my future, and I think of some of my first ever serious job interviews that I was in. Not bullshit jobs that I did before, but again, in the work I do for what I do for a living, you start to really get a sense of people's motivations. What drives them. The only thing in my life that's ever been of any true value to me, that's ever motivated me, and it's an extremely high motivator, but it is the value that I attach to my name. And nowadays, I again, you and initially you're not sure of it, then you wrestle with it, then you think, oh, but it doesn't sound right, and then eventually you embrace it and you lean into it. And now I use it as a means to motivate people. And I say, look, for me, I don't give a shit about money. I don't care about anything other than the fact that when somebody says my name, I want there to be a degree of instant respect that elicits. Like, they need to know, like, that person is one of the best people at what they do, or a variation thereof. Like, he's one of the best at what he does. The guy knows his shit. There needs to be like an instant degree of respect that comes with that. So I take my name is extremely serious to me, and I don't think it's something that developed in my adult life. I think it's always been that way. I just don't think I had the degree of self-awareness to be cognizant of it. And so then, because of that, when you in that position where you're made to feel like a fucking absolute buffoon, the biggest nerd at the party, that's gonna sit and stick in your craw for a long time. And again, you're gonna do every single thing you possibly can, unconscious or subconsciously, to prove to yourself that you're not that person. I think that's where a lot of my issues came from. And again, as I said, when you finally become self-aware enough to see that about yourself, and you're honest enough with yourself to admit it, that's when you can start to unpick, and you can start to go, okay, well, I understand my own makeup and my own thinking, my own approach to life a bit more now, that I can manipulate my own matrix a bit, or my own algorithm a little bit more than I was able to previously. And I mean, there's still stuff that'll or that I'd be vulnerable to. God forbid anything happens to my dog. I couldn't fucking deal with that. So podcast will be offline for 10 months if something happens to her.
Understandable.
But I definitely, I definitely think a lot of it is down to validation and to what actually drives you as a human being. And if you're driven by competition, or that sort of inherent need for self-respect, dealing with rejection is very hard, especially when you're young, because you're not smart enough, you're not self-conscious enough yet to understand why it's happening or why you're feeling this way.
Listen, man, that is so fucking powerful. And you know what? Just as you're saying that, I am thinking, and I'll tell you this, and I wonder if you relate to this. I feel like we have even more in common than I realize. That this is only the fucking 7th.
I think that's why we get on so well.
I know. I think there is something there, because one of my biggest faults as a person straight up, just saying it like as it is, one of my biggest faults is exactly what you just described, whereas that I'll be far too concerned about people remembering me the right way, and this is something that I've had to deal a lot with in the last few years, and I've gotten over it, and I think I do a much better job of managing this now. But even as far as, say, a couple of years ago, I would still be thinking to myself like, ooh, like there's this ex's family who I was kind of close with, but then they were kind of dicks to me, but I still want them to remember me well. Shall I send them like a Christmas card? Maybe, like they'll still remember that I'm the good person, and then maybe they'll still take and then I'm like, no, you don't fucking do that. You're already in a position of, first of all, you were already the winner of that whole thing. What are you still trying to dictate? Why are you still trying to control that dynamic? That it served its purpose. It's gone. It's all finished and done with. Yet you're here still trying to control people's perception of you just so that they remember you in a way that they respect you. And I'm like, if I wanted to unpack that, that's some weird form of fucking narcissism. I don't want to be like that. But it's this a fragile thing of you want people to remember you the right way, which is a dangerous thing when you let that dictate your entire life. Like there's one aspect that you've got self-respect and you put yourself across with self-respect and you take things seriously and you want, like you said, you want your name to be respected. But sometimes you can't always cater to that, because what should come before that is that you'll always stand your ground, that you'll always fight for the values that you believe in, regardless of whether other people will like that or not. Okay? And so some of that might even result in some kind of backlash. It might even result in some kind of people not liking what you have to say, or when your name comes up, someone says, oh, yeah, that guy, isn't he the one who said that? Fuck him. Doesn't matter. I think as long as you stand your ground, that's where the respect to your name matters the most. And that's been my lesson so far.
My lesson is Ric Flair's quote when he was in the Horsemen: "Whether you like it or you don't, learn to love it because it's the best thing going today." I mean, I don't believe it to that extreme, but I don't really give a shit whether anyone likes or dislikes me. I've got plenty of friends. So what for me the important thing is no, like you can't argue with data, you can't argue with evidence. So anything that I do, I will do my level best to be the absolute best I can possibly be, and ideally the best at what I'm doing. Because again, like I said, I want people that whether they think I'm the greatest guy ever or whether they think I'm a fucking asshole, that's irrelevant to me. They have to think that they have to know that I'm good at what I do, and that I'm not somebody to, I'm not somebody to take lightly. So that's my biggest driver, my biggest motivation in life. It's having that degree of self-respect and needing to be able to look myself in the mirror and go, you've done the absolute best you can do at this. I do think it as well, I don't want to sound cocky saying that either. I do think you need a humbling force in your life again, which is why I'm such a big proponent of doing martial arts, especially, full contact martial arts, not bullshit. So, Thai boxing, stuff that is going to bring you
not telekinesis,
right down to
arts.
earth. No, not fucking, Aikido and nonsense like that. Do stuff where you can get your ass kicked. Because you do need a humbling. Every man needs a humbling force in their life. They need to know what it feels like to get their ass beat and to be made to kind of, be down on the ground so that you can kind of hoist yourself back up from that, hoist yourself up from the ashes. But
it teaches you consequences, same as that story I said earlier about the knife thing. It's good to know consequences of things, and that's a lot of what's missing is people doing or saying something but then not facing any kind of consequences for it. I think now there's different versions of that. There's one consequence where you go up to someone, say something rude, and then they'll punch you in the face. There's that kind of consequence, like the kid who was stuck behind Mike Tyson on the airplane. Or there's the kind of consequence of, you'll say something that goes against the narrative, and then people will try to cancel you. Really, ideally you wanna go with the former, but at the end of the day, I think it's important to be able to, in your mind, accept the consequences regardless of your actions, and make sure that your actions are what you truly believe in your heart. I think that's a powerful thing. That's the way I like to look at it. It's the same, like the whole idea of having a fucking black metal band in the Islamic Republic and then still sticking to it, knowing that the consequences could be imprisonment or death. Fuck him. Let him do whatever they can. Obviously it was scary, but you still choose to do what's right in your heart. And it's like you said, it's that respect to your name. It's that you take yourself seriously in a way of not like humor or like your personality, but rather your actions. I think that's very important.
Well, yeah, and then again at the same time, you talk about taking things seriously. Some people will take themselves too seriously, and I said this on my podcast this past week. Nothing in life that's worthwhile, or no idea that's virtuous or has any real substance or merit, cannot withstand scrutiny or jokes or satire. I mean, my friends take the piss out of me all the time. I don't care. I take the piss out of myself. I know there's a whole load of fucking stupid, idiotic things that I do. I thought it was hysterical when the guys from Cloak messaged me and they were like, they've got like a host of sayings of mine from the news rant that they repeat to each other on the bus. I'm like, brilliant. It's like, cool. I know I've got funny quirks and funny habits and funny tendencies. I don't give a shit when the people notice that. If it makes you laugh away. I don't care. So yeah, you have to understand as well. Like I said, that you can't take yourself that seriously, because I think people that take themselves too seriously, I think there's a problem there. They're overcompensating for something.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like that. I mean, listen. You want to talk about inside jokes? Me and my girlfriend, we have inside jokes just about me, like about me as a person that we'll laugh about. Obviously, like it's stuff that I won't really like go and share online and whatnot, but here, hang on 1 second. I don't know if I should show this. It's pretty fucking dodgy. But listen, you want to talk about taking yourself seriously? Everyone thinks like, I think this is the perception as well. A lot of people do probably think that, oh, these guys fucking, like they're so serious and whatever. And it's like, one time, this fucking promoter, was it a promoter? Who the fuck was this asshole that I was talking to? No, the guy who I was talking to wasn't the asshole, but he was reporting to me of another asshole saying that, well, a lot of people in the UK scene are saying that Trivax is too serious. I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like, are we supposed to go on stage with fucking balloons and birthday cakes or something? Or what are you talking about? Like we're serious about what we do, and we're serious about our message. That's like, what are you after here? Are you after a band or musicians or fucking both, clowns?
You and Sully both paid a very heavy price to be able to deliver the message that you're delivering, and to be able to play the music that you're playing. So you have every right to be serious about what you do.
Yeah, precisely. My point is that we're serious about the message, but that doesn't define our personalities. We're 3 guys. Well, 4 guys now with our new live guitarist Kieran joining us as well. We're 4 different fucking personalities. I like to think we're all pretty funny people too. And I don't say that to cater to anyone, but between us, I think we're fucking hilarious. Like especially like me and my drummer, when we're together, we're always laughing at shit. We'll still have like very deep conversations too, but we're always joking around and stuff. That doesn't mean that now we don't mean what we do with the music, and vice versa. Just because our music is fucking serious and straight to the bone doesn't mean that we are now like this all the time. Like every time I go to groceries, I'm there fucking in a blasphemy shirt and cross arms and sunglasses saying like, yeah, like, can I have a receipt, please? It's like, we're not fucking like this.
You wouldn't use please if you were truly serious. If you're truly cult, you don't use the word please.
I would say, give me a receipt, you fat fucking cunt. But yes.
In
I don't know why I
Satan's
just
name,
said
I
that.
demand a receipt.
This is exactly the thing I'm talking about. I mean, look at this fucking goddamn picture of me here. You know, like how can you say I'm a fucking serious guy when you have a print of a photo of me like this on the fucking in my room? My girlfriend printed me that. You know, that's like we've. I think both you and I have absolutely overshared on this podcast, and I love it. And
I'm
that
about to
was
say
the
it is
epitome.
hands down the most personal conversation I've had in put out into the public ever. So,
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Well, let's not. When I do the intro, I'm not gonna explain what we talk about. You know, so anyone who's made it this far, other than the pussies that fucking scroll along rather than actually watch the whole thing, I think that this will just be a reward for anyone who makes their way through it. So I
about to
think
say
that's
they've been on quite an odyssey.
and as we have. So there we
Yeah,
go,
no,
man.
well, dude, again, I'll just say this. You spoke earlier about, we have a lot in common. I actually think, again, one of the things I've learned as I've grown older is when it comes to friendships, when it comes to relationships, it's actually not the stuff that you have, the surface level stuff that you have in common. It's whether or not you have like the same personality blueprint. Like you think about it in terms of say like the operating system that you use on your phone, right? You've got an Apple phone has got iOS, and Google Pixel has got Android, and those on the surface they look the same. They've got loads in common, but they operate in a very different way. The people they get on best, the relationships that form the deepest, the relationships between men and women that work best, it's people that have the same blueprint, the same operating system. And I genuinely believe, like I thought so from when we first spoke, and it's been re-emphasized ever since. I think we've got a very similar operating system. Again, which is why I think we get on so well, and which is why I think you'll know when I say how much I value your friendship, and how much I appreciate the opportunity I've had in my life to get to know you, and to continue to call you a friend. How much that means to me. I mean, you'll know how sincerely I mean that.
Absolutely, brother, and you know that the feeling is mutual, and I'm grateful that you allowed me on your podcast back in January 2021. 21 was it? Yeah, fuck.
Yeah, it was 2021.
Oh wow, this is it's been a long time, hasn't it? And every time you've invited me back since then, all the support you've given, not just for Trivax, but the music on the ground in general, and I can see you're a very genuine person, and you mean what you do, and I've always you're one of the people who I've always felt inspired by, and when we're speaking, there are things that we'll discuss that we obviously have very different experiences in life and very different backgrounds, but I think that what brings us together is exactly that passion, and the passion for what we do, but for also just meaning the life that we live. You know what I'm saying? It's that a lot of people just exist, but we mean the life that we're living, and it's like taking every second by the fucking throat. So I very much appreciate and respect that about you, and yeah, likewise, I'm grateful that that we've been able to do all of these, and I'm sure they'll continue, but if for whatever reason we all get nuked and that doesn't happen, at least we got to do it here, okay?
Yeah.
And that's what I appreciate.
I'm just looking now. So first ever episode we did was episode 65 on Into the Necrosphere. That was the 1st of February 2021. It'd be interesting going back and listening to that now and hearing how much things have changed since then as well.
Well, I remember that I told you that Death was the most popular band in Iran, so we had an interesting conversation about that.
Yeah.
And I was also throwing Islam under the bus, so I guess not a lot has changed, huh?
Probably not, no.
I remember you telling me, it was like, Cheyenne, yeah, you're a great guest, but I'm just worried, if I'm going to get in trouble with my workplace, if people might watch the episode with you. It's like, yeah, if that's going to happen with anyone, it's going to be fucking me. So there you go.
Well, I think the thing also is I think hopefully folks realize that everything that was discussed on the show it's coming from a place of either intellectual curiosity or certainly not from a place of wanting to cause anyone any harm. even thinking about stuff like, like what I said about the government, and I want the government to have less intrusion in people's lives, because I genuinely believe that leads to better outcomes for everybody. So it's not because I believe that one person should be that I want to push one group of people down, or one person down, to create an advantage for myself. So I think hopefully folks can get that sense, as far as both of our podcasts are concerned. The intention is not in any way negative. The intention comes from a genuine place of love and empathy and I think positivity.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think, and that the criticism as well that we do imply is a valuable and a powerful thing. And the reason for that is, like you said, it comes from a place of empathy. Yes, there might be parts of it that are somewhat destructive, but that's so that so if ideas are broken down, then you can build them back up better, build back better. But,
Yeah.
but, like that's the idea. It's very much the spirit of Kali, Mahakali. It's that she's a fierce character of very loving, very powerful, but also extremely destructive. That's her deity and her power and her energy field that you step into. And I think there's like the sum of the nature of those same characteristics in this kind of thing is that, yeah, you might be destroying, you might be demolishing this building, but then you're gonna build back better. But
yeah,
but that's the general idea. So like you say, it always comes from a good point, but I don't think there's much need in explaining or justifying it. I'm sure that people understand, and if they don't, then that's on them. And yes, that's all good. We're still gonna say what we're saying. So here we go. And also, 100%. We've just completed the longest episode of Iblis Manifestations. So cheers to that. I'm gonna drink some coconut water to that.
Cool. Awesome, brother. Well, I have to hit the hay. I'm up at 5 tomorrow morning to go to the gym. So after our video episode, I was like, I need to fucking get my act together. So no, 5 o'clock, and it's leg day tomorrow. So
motherfucker, you're going what, like 4 or 5 hours sleep, doing leg day on an empty stomach? How?
Yeah. I always do that. I always train on an empty stomach.
Interesting.
And I'll have about 6 hours sleep.
Okay.
Six is kind of the minimum. If I had less than 6, then I wouldn't have gone tomorrow. But I stayed in this morning because I had early calls and stuff for work and things like that. So
no, that's all good, man. Well, listen, 2 days off. We would probably have gone on for another 10 hours had it not been for our mortal shells letting us down, because I'm exactly in the same boat as yourself as well. I got shit to do in the morning. I already called in sick to work today just so I could have an extra day of just doing stuff, basically. That's the life of an entrepreneur and someone who's managing a million fucking things.
Yeah.
But here we are, man. Brother, it's been a fucking pleasure. What an episode. Then thank you so 100%. much. Forget the episode. It's just always a pleasure to chat to you, man. I always find it inspiring, and it gets my brain juices flowing, and I always learn from talking to you. So I appreciate it, man. And yeah, and obviously to everyone else listening as well, hope you guys fucking enjoyed this one. If you made it so far, well, first of all, here's a virtual trophy to you, and yeah, hope it's been of value just as much as it has for myself at least, anyway. And yeah, see you guys in the next episode.